Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Tsunade adopts Naruto after Kushina abandons him and leaves the village. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. October 11th. Kanahigaku no Sato, Konoha Hospital. Kushina had awoken feeling more exhausted than ever. Her eyes fluttered open as she groggily looked around to see where she was. The all-white room, the patient's gown, and the definite smell of antibacterial spray allowed her to figure she was in the hospital. She sat up feeling pain course through her body with every movement she made. Then memories of the night before came rushing back to her, as she remembered all that she had lost that night. She remembered how her husband sacrificed himself to seal that demon and save the village. She felt a pang of guilt as she remembered how he said he split the yin and yang halves of the chakra and sealed them into Mito and Kara while they sealed the soul into their only boy Naruto. With a significant amount of effort, she managed to get up and make her way to the door, dragging her feet along the icy tiles of the hospital floor. The door clicked open, halting her progress, and in came Tsunade, Jiraiya, Hiruzen, and Kakashi. All present seemed to be astounded that she was already up and about. Kushina, even if you are an Uzumaki, having a bijou ripped from your body is enough to kill anyone. The extraction has taken its toll on you. You should rest and let your body recover from the strain. She scolded Kushina, but she paid it no mind. Tsunade brought her back to the bed and helped to set her gently as she started going through her medical charts. Well, Kushina, you should be fine after a week's worth of rest. But there has been a lot of damage to your chakra coils that will take some time to recover. You will have to spend a couple of years in rehabilitation to let your chakra coils recover before you could use the shinobi arts again, she said, and Kushina nodded and gave her a small smile as Tsunade smiled back. Alright, you all can talk, I have to go and check on some other surgeries that are going on, she said and left as Hiruzen gave her a grateful nod for returning to the village in its time of need. He knew it was only temporary, but the village needed her medical skills, and he was glad she was there. She had saved many lives already, treating the patients that had been deemed beyond saving by the medical staff, and he couldn't be prouder of his student. He walked up to Kushina's bed as he saw she was lost in thought, and put a hand over her shoulder as she looked at him surprised that she had spaced out, and smiled a little smile back, and he saw that she was hiding the pain that was in her heart. Hiruzen, where are my children? Please bring them to me, she said in a pleading voice, and he nodded as the three men walked up to the cribs, and each took hold of a peacefully sleeping child in their arms. Hiruzen and Jiraiya laid the twin red-headed girls in her arms as she looked at them, smiling that they had wholly inherited her Uzumaki traits as they gazed at her with their tired violet eyes and went back to sleep. The three men smiled at seeing their interaction, and Kakashi stepped forward to hand over her third child. Kushina saw the blonde bundle in his arms, and her eyes widened as she laid her first gaze on him and immediately began to cry. He was a Namikaze, golden blonde hair, sun-kissed skin, and jewels of the deepest azure for eyes. She then noticed the 6 faint whisker marks on his cheeks and remembered what he held. Growing cold, she began to lose sight of the boy, and all she could see was a bleeding Minato. Her surroundings faded away. The panic of the previous night came rushing back to her as she saw the Kyuubi piercing Minato's abdomen with his claw as he tried to save Naruto and finally seal the monster's soul into him. With a hateful glare, her hands slapped Kakashi's away. Kakashi was startled by this look, from the closest person he had to a mother, and jolted back. Naruto felt the movement and was about to wake, only for Kakashi to start rocking the little child who drifted back into a deep slumber snuggling in his arms. He smiled under his mask, seeing how much he looked like his beloved sensei. Hiruzen and Jiraiya, too, saw the interaction and were surprised at Kushina's actions. Hiruzen decided to voice his confusion as he felt dread form in the pit of his stomach. Kushina, what's wrong? Don't you want to hold your son? He asked gently, and she stared at him with icy eyes that startled even him. That thing is not my son anymore, she said in an icy cold tone, and all three were wide-eyed at what she said. Kushina, what do you mean? Naruto is your son? Hissed Jiraiya in a low voice, not wanting to startle the sleeping kids, and she glared at him. No, my son died the moment Minato sealed the soul of the Kyuubi into him. He is possessed by the demon that killed my husband and almost destroyed the village. Look at those whiskers on his cheek. They are proof enough of the possession. He is the reason my husband died and left me alone, she hissed in rapid succession, glaring at the blonde bundle in Kakashi's arms as he held him protectively and backed up, away from the distressed mother. Hiruzen was stunned at the confession she made and the pure hatred she glared at the little blonde bundle. Kushina, you can't be serious, that is your son. Just look at the resemblance he bears with Minato. He has inherited those strong Namikaze genes from your husband. Don't be blinded by your hatred. He spoke gently, trying to get the point across. Kushina, you are a Jinchuriki yourself, you should know better than anyone that's impossible, said Jiraiya in a calm tone, trying to keep his temper in check while Kushina's face darkened as she glared at them. That thing killed my husband and took possession over my son's body, and those marks on his face are proof enough. I never had them, and neither do Mito or Kara have them now. Minato must have slipped up the ceiling in his last moments, and the demon took advantage of it. Just finish that thing off and be done with it. It has caused so much damage to this village and my family already," she said in a cold tone, and all three were wide-eyed at her words, and their eyes turned cold as they glared at her. "I expected better from you, Kushina," said Hiruzen as Jiraiya and Kakashi too followed him without saying a word. They walked out of the room and sat down on the bench in the hallway, all of them in deep thought. Tsunade was walking down the halls as she saw the three sitting there with thoughtful expressions on their faces and saw the little blonde bundle in Kakashi's arms as he stirred awake and was getting a bit uncomfortable. Kakashi tried to calm him down, but he kept struggling. All the three men tried everything they could, but the boy wasn't calming down as they saw his troubled expression. He wasn't crying, but they knew he was uncomfortable and nearly whimpering, but they didn't know why or what to do for him. Tsunade saw the pathetic attempt of the three men calming him down. They were all startled as Tsunade walked up to them and took him in her arms as she wrapped him up in a warm embrace. He instantly calmed down and smiled as she rubbed his back gently, and held him by his waist as she gazed at him with a loving expression. Naruto just kept staring at her with wide blue curious eyes, and she smiled at him lovingly as she kissed him softly on the lips, and he giggled happily as she rocked and cooed him, making him laugh all the more. "Aren't you adorable, my little angel?" she cooed, and he gazed at her curiously and rubbed her cheek softly with a bright smile as she held him closer to her. All the three were dumbfounded as Tsunade played with the little child that they were trying so hard to calm down, and smiled a moment later, seeing her lost in her own world. She cradled him in her arms and watched as he was smiling and giggling as she rubbed his whiskers that made him look all the more adorable in her eyes. She brought him closer to her chest as he yawned cutely and snuggled into her embrace and just went back into his deep slumber again. She smiled at his peaceful sleeping face and gazed at the three smiling men and looked on curiously. "Why is it that you three idiots are taking care of him instead of Kushina?" she asked, and all of them looked down ashamed, confusing her greatly. "Well, you see, Tsunade, Kushina has kind of abandoned Naruto thinking that he is possessed by the Kyuubi," said Hiruzen nervously as the temperature of the hallways dropped a couple of degrees. "What?" she asked in a low voice, and all of them began to sweat as Kakashi spoke up. "Well, you see, Tsunade-sama, she believes him to be the Kyuubi and that his soul has taken over his body. She even went as far as to call for the boy's death," explained Kakashi nervously, and Hiruzen sighed. "Yeah, and she won't be the only one too. Once word gets out about his status or heritage, there will be whole villages out for him, not excluding our own. With Kushina abandoning him, he has nowhere to go, the orphanage won't be safe anymore, nor does he have any family since Minato was orphaned. He can't be entrusted to just anyone," he said sadly, and all of them looked down as Kakashi spoke up. "Wait, Jiraiya-sama, why don't you adopt the boy? You are his godfather, plus he will be safe with you," said Kakashi, and Jiraiya grew nervous as he looked around, trying to think of an excuse. "Well, Kakashi, I have to run the spy network for the village, and I can't have a fear of a helpless child with me if someone tries to attack me or something. And I am not a great father material kind of a guy, you know," he said, laughing nervously, and Hiruzen sighed. "I would have adopted him, but the council will raise hell over it, and with Biwako's death and me retaking the Hokage position, I cannot take care of him. There just isn't enough time for me to give if he is with me," he said, full of regret, and both turned to Kakashi. "Well, I have ANBU duties, and I don't have any experience with children. While I would be honored to be raising Sensei's child, I just don't think I have what it takes to commit to raising a person to adulthood. I'm not even there yet," he said as all three of them looked down on the ground, thinking of what to do as Tsunade had enough of their rambling. "Pathetic," she whispered, and they all looked at her questionably. "To think that you would all make such excuses and leave the child of the person who gave up his life for this pathetic excuse of a village. How far has this village fallen? To think that a mother abandons her own son, his father's friends abandon his son as a worthless child, and the village he died protecting is calling for the murder of his child. The only excused one is Kakashi since he is a kid. This isn't the village that my grandfather and granduncle envisioned and died for. It was their dream that no child should ever suffer the childhood that they faced in their era, and thus, the village hidden in the leaves was found, but I guess they failed," she said icily, and all of them averted their eyes ashamed as the truth slammed into their faces. "Don't worry about the child if none of you cowards are willing to take responsibility for him. I'll adopt him as my own son," she said calmly, and all of their eyes widened as Hiruzen smiled hopefully. "So you are going to stay in the village now, Tsunade?" he asked hopefully, and she scoffed as they all looked confused. "I've seen the real face of this village tonight, and it disgusts me to no end. No, I will be retiring from the shinobi forces entirely and go out of the village to raise Naruto there as my own son. He will be safer there than here with all the wolves hunting him in the village," she said, and Hiruzen was wide-eyed. "You can't be serious, Tsunade. The village needs you now more than ever, and Naruto belongs here where his father wanted him to be raised," he said desperately, and she glared at him icily as he flinched from the stare. "I came here just to treat the people of this village from the attack, only because I heard about the magnitude of the destruction. I was going to retire anyway, but I guess destiny had a beautiful plan for me in mind." Kami gave me a beautiful son to raise and live for. She whispered softly, kissing Naruto, and Hiruzen smiled sadly knowing she was right, and he had no way to make her stay. Plus, Naruto was not safe in the village at the moment. The villagers were plotting ways to get rid of him, and the council wanted him to keep the demon away from the hero twins so that he won't get his power back and kill them. But Tsunade, what about his father's enemies? They will be hunting him down. You are safer here than outside the village, said Jiraiya, knowing the village needed the strength of a Sannin and her skills desperately at the moment, and she glared at his pathetic excuse for keeping her tied down. Please, I am one of the Sannin, Jiraiya, and my skills haven't gone rusty since I got rid of my hemophobia. I have upped my skills again, and I don't think that anyone is stupid enough from IWA or Kumo to take me on just for the sake of hurting a child and bring the wrath of Konoha on them. They are recovering from the last war themselves and won't do anything stupid for now. Nothing any of you say will make me stay in the village any longer, she said, and Jiraiya nodded hesitatingly, knowing she was right. Kakashi just listened silently, knowing Tsunade will be giving him the love of a mother that he so desperately needed. It was the best for him, and he was happy for his sensei's legacy. Alright, Sarutobi-sensei, I'll send my retirement papers to your office tomorrow morning along with the adoption papers for Naruto. I'll leave tomorrow at noon after we have dealt with everything, she said, and he nodded hesitantly, knowing there wasn't anything he could say to make her stay in the village. Alright, then I have healed all those that needed my immediate assistance, and left the rest of the cures needed with the medical staff. If that is all, I will be retreating to the Senju compounds for the night. Naruto and I need a bit of sleep, she said, getting up, and they watched her leave with ashamed faces, knowing that the truths she spoke of their cowardice would sting them for quite some time. Senju compounds. Tsunade walked through the large Senju compounds to the house of the clan head, and saw that this abandoned part of the village was mostly unscathed, with the barrier seals of her grandmother still holding up stable even after all these years. She walked through the gate of the house and on to the rock steps on the grounds of the massive garden towards the old royal two-story house that was still as elegant and beautiful as it was in its former days. She opened the door as the barrier didn't stop her, recognizing her blood and chakra signature, and she walked in towards the master bedroom and put down Naruto on the massive bed as she went into the bathroom to get changed into her sleepwear, and came out in a white robe tied around her, and her hair flowing freely as she sat on the bed and took up Naruto in her arms and sat down as she heard the door open and knew Shizen must have come home. Shizen slid open the door and dropped the small bag in her hand in shock as she saw Tsunade there holding a little child in her arms, gazing at him lovingly. She wondered who the child was, and his blonde hair just shocked her all the bit more. Tsunade-sama, who is that child? She asked in a stunned voice, pointing at Naruto, and Tsunade saw Naruto's eyes open slightly from the voice as he yawned cutely and gazed at her with those wide blue curious eyes again. Shizen came beside her and sat down as she watched the adorable child that wasn't even paying attention to her and just staring at Tsunade curiously. Tsunade kissed his lips softly, and he smiled and giggled happily as she cooed him, and suddenly Naruto tugged on her robe slightly. She thought that he must be hungry since the last food he was given at the hospital was 6 hours ago. She gently opened her robe as Naruto latched himself on her, and she held him close to her as she held a ram hand seal, and Naruto started feeding himself happily. Shizen watched in disbelief as she saw her master feeding the little child on her own, but didn't understand how that was even possible for her to do. How? She stuttered out, and Tsunade smiled at her little apprentice. This is a medical jutsu that I wanted to introduce to the nurses at the hospital for children who lost their mothers unexpectedly and needed to be fed. The council shot down the proposal, seeing that it took a lot of training and time, and they thought of it as a waste of time for potential combat medics during the war. Well, I guess it does have its uses now. The user sends the medical chakra, activating our mammary glands forcefully, and stimulates them to create the milk for the child. I am the only one for now who can use it with the amount of control it needs, or it could lead to cancer in any inexperienced females attempting it, she said as Shizen nodded with a smile, and was amazed at the skill of her master as she watched the little blonde boy feed himself. She saw the glow of happiness on Tsunade's face and smiled at the two. She hadn't seen that smile on her face in so many years. This was what she needed the most. She mused. Who is he, Tsunade-sama? She asked, and Tsunade changed the position for little Naruto as he latched onto her other and gazed at Shizen with a smile. I have adopted him, Shizen, and his name is Naruto. Kushina has abandoned him. He is Minato's son and has the soul of the Kyuubi sealed into him. The whole village, his mother included, has abandoned him and is calling for his death. I'll take him away from this village and raise him as my heir. I will send my retirement papers tomorrow morning along with his adoption papers, and will leave tomorrow at noon, she said, and Shizen was wide-eyed that they would do such a thing and watched as Naruto stopped, and Tsunade smiled as she tied her robe again. She undid her jutsu and watched as Naruto was staring at her curiously, and then saw him looking at Shizen for the first time. Shizen gasped as she saw his wide, beautiful cerulean eyes staring at her curiously and hesitantly took him in her arms as she saw him staring at her. She just resisted the urge to yell kawaii and glomp him to death at his adorable face. She watched as he gazed back at Tsunade and opened his arms to her, urging her to hold him, and she took him from her and cradled him in her arms as he snuggled into her embrace happily. Shizen was surprised that he had such an attachment to her in such a short amount of time. "He likes you, Tsunade-sama," she whispered as she saw Naruto feeling sleepy and going in and out of sleep, and Tsunade nodded. "Yes, after all, he is my son." She spoke in a soft and happy voice, making Shizen smile as she walked out of the room towards her own, letting them have their rest. Tsunade laid down with her head on the pillow facing sideways as she gazed into the sleepy eyes of the little blonde beside her. "Do you like me as your mother, Naruto-chan?" she whispered softly, and he rubbed her cheek with his tiny hand, and she kept her own on his, and as she brought him close, and he snuggled into the crook of her neck happily, and she smiled. It was almost as if he understood the words she mused. She closed her own eyes and went to sleep with a big smile after all those years. "Good night, Naruto-chan," she whispered as sleep claimed them both, and they slept peacefully into the night. The next morning, Tsunade woke up with a yawn as she felt something snuggle into her neck and a small breath on her neck as she gazed down at the little blonde bundle cuddled up against her and smiled. She slowly sat up with him in her arms as he too yawned cutely and gazed at her with those curious cerulean orbs. His eyes and his little smile transfixed her, and she was surprised that he hadn't cried once since last night when those 3 idiots were scaring her cute baby. She fed him as he tugged on her robe again, and she rubbed his back gently, waiting for him to burp, and then freshened up herself and little Naruto as she sat in the warm water of the bathtub with Naruto in her arms, who was giggling and playing with the water. She played with him and laughed so happily after a long time and felt completely refreshed. She walked out of the bathroom as she walked over to the dresser and closet for some clothes. She opened it and saw her usual clothes but chose to discard the green jacket for today and wore a white full-sleeved battle kimono that gave her excellent access if she had to feed Naruto again. She picked up Naruto and put the diapers on him that Shizen had brought her a while ago and wrapped him up in a blue blanket with the Senju symbol on it as she walked out with her hair tied in a loose bun with a sanban. She walked through the streets and towards the Hokage Tower as every villager turned and gazed at her curiously, seeing the little blanket in her arms and whispering things about who the child was, or was he her son, since they looked at his blonde hair and started gossiping. She paid the idiots no mind as she gazed down at the little boy hidden from the villagers in the blanket, and saw him playing with a lock of free hair of hers and smiled as she came up to the Hokage Tower. Hokage Tower, Hokage Office. Hiruzen was going through his paperwork, and was wondering if it would ever end. The stacks just kept piling up no matter how many he completed. He sighed as he heard a knock on the door and sighed in relief from the break he got. "Come in," he said, and the door opened as Tsunade walked in with the blue blanket in her arms, and he saw the familiar mop of sun-kissed blonde hair peeking out of it, and smiled at his student. Maybe this would be good for the both of them, he mused. Tsunade walked up and placed a scroll on his desk with the official Senju clan seal on it, and he sighed. "Tsunade, you don't have to retire, you have a lot of years ahead of you, and you already have Sannin travel rights. You can just go without retiring." He tried to persuade her one last time, and she just scoffed. "Please, Sarutobi-sensei, that means the village can recall me if there is ever a trouble and force me to return. I don't want to return to this village until I want to and until Naruto-chan is ready for it," she said, and he sighed as he took the scroll and unsealed it. It was worth a try, he mused as he stamped the scroll, handing it to her secretary, and knew the council would raise hell over it. He took out the papers for adoption and kept them in front of her as Tsunade took a seat and picked up the brush, signing it as Hiruzen took them back and stamped them with his official seal and handed them to his secretary too. "Sarutobi-sensei, this adoption is official, right? I mean, Kushina is still his real mother," she said with uncertainty as Hiruzen cut her off with a wave. "I had the paperwork done with her last night after you left, and she has evicted Naruto from the Uzumaki clan and has cut all her ties with him. She requested for Minato's inheritance, and I am afraid that Minato has left most of his fortune for the girls since Kushina has evicted him from it, and left just a little for Naruto. Minato believed Kushina would take care of him and left her the guardian of his fortune, but he has left the knowledge he had for Naruto, seeing he took after him," he said, handing her some scrolls with the Namake's seals, and Tsunade took them with a smile. "Well, I don't care about the money anyways, the Senju fortune is already large enough. And I'm sure Naruto-chan will appreciate these much more than money anyways," she said, and Hiruzen nodded with a smile. "I suggest you keep the name Naruto Senju for now and do not associate with the Namake's name for the time being until the animosity dies down a bit, alright?" he said, and she nodded with a smile as she gazed down at the little child in her arms. "So how do you like your new name, Naruto-chan? Naruto Senju has a nice ring to it, right?" she asked, cooing, and he giggled happily, making the adult smile, and Tsunade sat there playing with him. "So Tsunade, where will you go now?" asked Hiruzen, and Tsunade answered him while playing with Naruto, not looking at him. "There is an old Senju compound in use from the Warring States era. Grandpa used to take me there when I was a child, and it is quite a big house with lots of open spaces and the protection of my grandmother and granduncle's seals. So it should be the safest place for Naruto-chan for now. There is a small village nearby for supplies and is unknown to almost everyone now," she said, and Hiruzen nodded sadly. "So when will you return to the village?" he asked, and she frowned. "I don't know, sensei, maybe when the village has recovered enough from their hate, and Naruto has grown up enough. If the villagers would still hold their hatred on him, then I don't know if I would ever return if Naruto doesn't want to," she said, and he nodded, hoping that the villagers came around in time. "So, I guess this is goodbye, for now, sensei," she said, standing up, and he nodded himself, getting up and walking her to the door. Tsunade left and walked down the streets as she entered a convenience store and bought some supplies for the trip and went back on her way to the Senju estate, avoiding the annoying gossiping villagers. Senju compounds. Tsunade walked in, seeing Shizen packing all the stuff up and smiled for her help. She sat down on the cushion in the enormous traditional Japanese living room as Shizen came in, finishing the packing, and smiled at her as she sat down in front of her. "So Tsunade-sama, did everything go alright?" she asked, pouring both of them some tea, and Tsunade took the glass gratefully and sipped it, keeping it down on the table. "Yes, Shizen, everything went fine, and from today onwards, our little Naruto is Naruto Senju to the world, and my son being the official clan heir to the Senju clan," she said happily, and Shizen smiled brightly. "So now I am a big sister, and have a little brother to coddle," she chirped happily, and Tsunade smiled and nodded as Shizen took the little boy in her arms. "Now I am your big sister Naruto, you like me, don't you? Isn't your big sister the best?" she asked, cooing, and he giggled, giving her a confirmation as she coddled him happily and played with him. Tsunade smiled, thinking about how he had made both of them so happy over the past 2 days. She saw that he was now warming up to Shizen, too, and was happy about it. "Shizen, is everything done? Are we ready to leave?" she asked, and Shizen nodded. "Hi Tsunade-sama, everything is done, and we can leave anytime we want," she said, and Tsunade nodded as she took Naruto from her arms, and both started sealing the things into storage scrolls, and Naruto giggled every time they sealed something at the poofing sound it made, and the both of them laughed as they saw him get upset when everything was sealed. Tsunade glomped him as he puffed his cheeks slightly and rubbed her cheek against his, making him giggle. Both of them picked up the scrolls and walked out of the compounds, going towards the gates. At the village gates, Tsunade came up to the gates, seeing some people standing there. Hiruzen, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and the 3 elders, too, were there with them. She frowned, thinking about what they could be wanting with her, and walked towards them. Koharu and Hamura came forward and gave her a warm smile, and Tsunade just gave a small nod of acknowledgement without so much as a slight smile. They noticed this and grimaced at her cold greeting, and she looked at their faces of disgust that they had for a moment as they gazed at Naruto, and she held the sleeping child tightly to her chest, which they noticed and frowned. "Tsunade-chan, why are you retiring and leaving the village? You have free Sannin travel rights, and we haven't forced you into anything all these years, so why are you doing this? We can always get you reinstated and forget about all this." "You don't have to leave," said Koharu with her grandmotherly smile as Tsunade spoke up. "No, I don't want to be tied down to this village any longer, and Naruto needs my full attention. I don't want you to recall me for any reason by force, and I have served this village quite enough already. I have fought in 2 of the last wars and have lost enough. It's time I left the shinobi forces and lived for myself," she said, and Hamura spoke up. "But Tsunade-chan, this is the village your ancestors built. The village needs the strength of a Sannin and the last Senju in the village at this time. You shouldn't leave, and that too just because of that thing," he said, venomously whispering the last part as Tsunade narrowed her eyes at the old coot. "You better hold your tongue, you old goat. That thing, as you called it, is my son and the heir to the Senju clan and the son of Minato Namikaze," she said coldly, and Hamura flinched and glared back as Danzo spoke up. "You should stay, Tsunade. What would your grandfather and grand-uncle think of you leaving the village behind?" he asked in his stoic voice, trying to guilt-trip her, and she glared at the old warhawk. "They would be ashamed of what this village has become, especially what some of their students have fallen to," she said as Danzo frowned, understanding her insinuation. He thought it to be a waste that the last Senju and a Sannin were leaving, and that too for a useless Jinchuriki with no chakra. Maybe if he tried, he could get the real Jinchuriki and make them good weapons for the village, he thought. All 3 backed down, seeing she was in no mood for any persuasion, and the other 3 stepped forward. "Well, Tsunade, keep writing and keep in touch with your old sensei, alright?" said Hiruzen, and she nodded with a small smile. Take care of Naruto, Tsunade-sama. I can't think of a better person than you to care for him. Maybe you could come back with him sometime," Kakashi said nervously, and Tsunade smiled, seeing the usually laid-back copy ninja fiddling with words, and nodded. "Don't worry, Kakashi, you'll see him, and I'll take care of him. After all, he is my son, don't you worry about a thing," she said, and Kakashi nodded with a nice smile. "Well, Tsunadeheim, don't you worry, I'll be seeing you soon. After all, I can't be too long gone without seeing my godson. And Minato did name him after my book's character," he said proudly, and she smiled. "Yeah, the only book you wrote that was worth anything," she said, and Jiraiya looked offended. "Hey, I'll have you know my books are a hit. Even Kakashi and Sensei have turned to my ways of exquisite literature. I'll let you know," he said, and she looked at the both of them incredulously, who were whistling innocently looking away, and Jiraiya continued. "And after all, maybe you could show me a thing or two from my research," he said, giggling perversely, and a moment later, he was embedded in the village wall crying anime tears as the other two sweat dropped. They all said their goodbyes and Tsunade walked out towards the old Senju hidden compounds with Shizen and little Naruto in her arms with a smile. 1 year later, Land of Fire, Hidden Senju compounds. The old hidden Senju compounds were back to life as they were being used for living peacefully instead of the hideouts they were previously used as. The compound's vast fields were flowing with life as the greenery that was grown was done by Hashirama Senju himself. While the stream flowing through the middle of the grounds was raised from an underground water source by her granduncle, Tobarama. These are the living and ongoing proof of the Senju's mastery over water element and nature itself. The old house standing there to the side of the compound was a traditional 2-story Japanese house that held the elegance that all the highly successful clan compounds like the Hyuga held, and sitting on the porch of the house looking at a small blonde boy was Tsunade. She smiled as she watched the boy cuddle up Katsuyu in his arms and giggling happily as he chased her around, crawling and giggling. She stood up, walking towards the little bundle of joy as she crouched down in front of him a few feet away, opening her arms as she urged for him to come to her. Naruto immediately forgot all about Katsuyu and started crawling happily to Tsunade, who stepped back a bit. He sat down, confused, tilting his head to the side cutely as she resisted with all her heart to not glomp the boy to death. She opened her arms again, and he smiled as he again started crawling to her, and she again stepped back a few steps giggling as Naruto sat down, puffing his cheeks, making him look all the more adorable in her eyes. Shizen sat to the side as she watched the mother-son duo playing. She saw Tsunade teasing the boy and laughed as she saw him puffing his cheeks at her teasing. She saw that he never cried no matter how much she teased him, and the most that Tsunade could get out of him was puffing of his cheeks. Tsunade opened her arms again and saw as Naruto put his hands to the ground and stood up with shaking legs as he took a step towards her, and her eyes widened. Shizen gasped as she got to her feet and her hands over her mouth as she saw Naruto take his first step. Tsunade's eyes watered as she saw him take his first step, and she saw him take another, and saw he was watching her sadly, and was confused but urged for him to come to her. "Come on, Naruto-chan, just a bit more. Come to Ka-chan," she said through a sob, and Naruto took 5 steps and stumbled as she grabbed her in his arms before he fell down, and saw him gazing at her curiously. He put his little hand on her cheek and wiped the tear away, and her eyes widened as she understood why he looked sad after his first step and embraced him tightly to her chest. "Oh God, Naruto-chan, you walk so much just because I cried. Oh my boy, I love you so much," she whispered, and he snuggled in her arms, making her smile. She gazed into his eyes that always drew her to him as she kissed him on the nose as he scrunched his face a bit, and she giggled. "Oh, you're Ka-chan's adorable little fox now, aren't you, Naruto-chan, aren't you?" She cooed and kissed him as he giggled, and Shizen laughed as she too joined in tickling the little boy. Suddenly they heard a voice startling them. "Hey, it isn't fair for 2 ladies to," said Jiraiya as he jumped up and saw a hail of kunai and samban concentrated on where his crotch was a moment ago, and turned ghastly white as he finished the sentence. "Team up on my godson Hui, what's the big idea that could have been fatal to little Jiraiya?" he yelled indignantly as Shizen lowered her samban launcher, and Tsunade lowered her hands that were filled with samban ready for another charge. "Well, you damn pervert, if you would come like a normal guest then maybe you would get a little safer welcome. And I would be glad if little Jiraiya disappeared, maybe then the girls can bathe freely," she said, and Naruto giggled, clapping as Tsunade smiled at Jiraiya knowingly, and he grumbled about disrespectful blondes, and Shizen laughed. "Even my own godson betrays me, what has the world come to?" he cried, anime tears walking up to Tsunade as Naruto patted his head in reassurance, making him cry harder and Tsunade and Shizen to hold their sides in laughter. "So what are you doing here, pervert?" asked Tsunade, and Jiraiya acted mock hurt, clutching his chest. "Oh, you hurt me, Haim, can't a godfather come and give his godson an early birthday present?" he asked, and pulled out a small wrapped bundle and handed it to her as she saw a cap with the toad looking like it would eat the one who wore it, and some stuffed toys, most of them toads, and she glared at the man. "You aren't going to get him to sign the toad contract before me, no matter how much you bait him," she said, glaring, and he whistled innocently. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Haim," he said in an all-too-innocent voice as Naruto clutched a stuffed toad to himself happily, and Jiraiya did a victory dance. "See, Haim, he is already coming around to the ways of the great toad sage Jiraiya," he said, doing a strange dance on a big samurai toad who croaked with a sweat drop, feeling ashamed. Tsunade and Shizen stared at him blankly while Naruto clapped and giggled. Jiraiya picked up Naruto, rubbing his cheek with his own as he cried happily. "Oh my, someone who appreciates true talent," he said happily as Shizen took Naruto from him, and a moment later his head was bashed into the ground. "True talent, my ass, that was pathetic," she said, cracking her knuckles as Shizen and Naruto giggled as they saw Tsunade and Jiraiya arguing about who Naruto would summon in the future. "Let's go and have some hot chocolate." "You like it, don't you, Naruto-chan?" asked Shizen, and Naruto nodded happily as she walked in, leaving the 2 arguing adults. A few minutes later, she saw them both come in as Tsunade had a victorious smirk on her face with Jiraiya and a lump on his head, grumbling about violent women winning arguments through demon strength. "What did you say?" asked Tsunade sweetly as the Shinigami's image appeared behind her. Jiraiya gulped and waved his hands in front of him in defense. Nothing, Tsunade-heim, he said nervously, and Tsunade nodded and sat beside Naruto, who was drinking his hot chocolate in his small mug happily as she faked a hurt expression. Oh, Naruto doesn't even share his hot chocolate with Kaa-chan. I'm hurt, Tsunade said as she faked some crying, and Naruto gazed at her with a sad expression. She felt a tug on her kimono and saw Naruto handing her the mug and the toad he had gotten from Jiraiya with watering eyes as he sniffed. She immediately scooped him up in her arms and tickled him, making him giggle. She embraced him as he snuggled into her arms and buried his face in the crook of her neck, making her smile. He really loves you, doesn't he, Haim? Said Jiraiya in a genuinely happy tone, and Shizen nodded with a smile. Yes, Jiraiya-sama. Naruto never cries even if he is hurt. But when Tsunade-sama is sad or crying, he would immediately start sniffing and his eyes water as he hugs her. He can't see Tsunade-sama sad. It is the only thing that brings him even close to crying, said Shizen, and he nodded as he watched Tsunade coo and tickle Naruto. Yes, he is my little Naruto and loves me the most, don't you, Naruto? She asked teasingly as she ran her fingers through his stomach, and he giggled, trying to cover himself up with the stuffed toad but to no avail. Jiraiya smiled as he saw how great a mother Tsunade was. He hadn't seen Kushina be this close with the twins. That was saying something since she tried to always be around them after losing Minato. So pervert, why aren't you in Konoha? I know Kushina is throwing a huge party for the twins, and with all the women there, it's strange that you would be here, asked Tsunade as she helped Naruto drink his hot chocolate slowly, and gently wipe his mouth with a small towel. Tsunade-heim, I don't have to go to parties for women. Girls fall at the charm of manliness that the great. He saw all of them staring at him blankly except Naruto, who watched him quite curiously, and it gave him confidence. Toad Sage Jiraiya, he said, summoning the samurai toad from earlier as Naruto clapped and giggled while Tsunade sighed. You shouldn't encourage him, Naruto, he is already bad enough, she said tiredly, and Jiraiya looked offended. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? He said indignantly as Naruto just giggled at the man who sat in a corner with a dark cloud over his head, muttering about not getting respect. Suddenly she heard a knock on the door, and wondered who it was since only a few people had access to pass the barrier to the compounds. She opened the door and saw Kakashi standing there, and waved at her lazily. Yo! He said, and she sweat dropped at his laid-back attitude. Kakashi, what are you doing here? I thought that with the Kyuubi festival in the village, the ANBU would be needed a lot more there, she said as she ushered him in, and he answered lazily. Yes, well, Tsunade-sama, you see, I had a bit of extra time for the start of the mission, and I thought visiting him before I started the duty for the festival tomorrow and reporting a bit later would be nice, he said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, and she giggled. Yeah, no one will really be surprised with you being late anyways, she said, and he smiled as they entered the living room, and he was surprised to see Jiraiya there. They saw that Shizen was trying to push Jiraiya off Naruto as he was trying to show him some book, and she frowned. What the hell is going on over here? Asked Tsunade, and Jiraiya immediately put the book back and smiled innocently as he slapped a hand over Shizen's mouth and laughed. Nothing at all, Haim, I was just playing with Naruto over here, and Shizen wanted to join us, he said, laughing nervously as she frowned and nodded, knowing he was lying as he let go of Shizen, glaring at the man. Well, Tsunade-sama, I brought a little present for little Naruto over here, said Kakashi with a nice smile as he handed her a package, and she unwrapped it to find some clothes that had dogs imprinted on it, and she glared at the Cyclops ninja, and Jiraiya and Shizen laughed wholeheartedly. I swear the whole world is trying to persuade my Naruto into being their summoner, she said with a sigh, and he sweat dropped. So this had already been tried, he mused and watched happily as Naruto took the clothes and jovially gazed at them. He smiled and sat the blonde on his lap as he played with him a little when Naruto suddenly pulled down the mask he wore. Everybody's heart stopped as they saw Naruto do the impossible and immediately got in front of the two to look at his face. They saw what he had under his mask was another mask. They all face faulted as he smiled, and Naruto giggled at seeing all of them pulling their hair at being outdone by him. A moment later, Naruto yawned as he opened his arms to Tsunade, motioning for her to pick him. She smiled as she picked him up and snuggled in her arms, making them all smile. Tsunade felt the familiar tug on her kimono, and saw Naruto looking at her innocently, and knew what he wanted. So little Naruto is hungry, isn't he? Asked Tsunade as he smiled and took him to her room with her as Shizen served tea to the two men who made it gratefully, and Jiraiya asked just before they were all going to sip it. So why did Tsunade take her inside her room? Wouldn't his food, be here? He asked, bringing the cup to his mouth as Shizen answered calmly. Oh no, Naruto has to be fed, so she took him inside to feed him herself, she said as both the men spit out their tea and violently coughed at the revelation. She's what? But how is that even possible? Asked Jiraiya with eyes as wide as saucers, and Kakashi too had a stunned expression on his face. Shizen smiled at seeing their shocks and answered. Tsunade-sama created a medical ninjutsu for nurses to feed young children who didn't have mothers at the hospital but wasn't ever implemented. However, it gave her a method to feed Naruto what a newborn child needs the most, she said, and they both nodded dumbly, thinking of the level that Tsunade had reached to create so many great medical techniques. Well, that kid has all the luck in the world. To think he is doing the thing that almost every man in the elemental nations has dreamt of doing, grumbled Jiraiya. And Kakashi nodded sagely while Shizen sighed, shaking her head. A moment later, Jiraiya started giggling perversely and got up and started walking as Shizen spoke up. I hope you aren't going to peek on them, Jiraiya-sama. I think you remember the incident 4 years ago and think what Lady Tsunade would do if she caught you peeking at her while she is feeding Naruto. She trailed off as Jiraiya stopped dead in his tracks. Kakashi gulped, both imagining what she would do, and started laughing nervously. Well, you have gotten the wrong Shizen. I was just going to the bathroom, he said, laughing nervously, and sat back down, sipping his tea as Shizen smiled and sipped her own cup as they sat in silence. As a few moments later, Tsunade came with a sleeping Naruto snuggled in her arms. She sat down on the table, smiling as she rubbed his whiskers, making him purr and snuggle into her more. So Tsunade-hime, Sarutobi-sensei sent this for Naruto's present, said Jiraiya, handing her a scroll as she took the scroll with a raised eyebrow and unsealed it as she saw a reverse summoning seal and threw it on the ground. A poof of smoke later stood Monkey King Enma as he looked at all of them, and then grinned at seeing the little sleeping blonde in Tsunade's arms. So this is the boy Sarutobi told me about. Well, he certainly is Minato's son and will be a powerful shinobi in the future. I can see the potential just by his chakra signature alone, he said, and Tsunade twitched as the temperature of the room dropped a couple of degrees, and she handed Naruto to Shizen as she stood up and cracked her knuckles, making the three of them gulp. A few moments later, Shizen gently cupped the ears of the sleeping child as the three men screamed in pain as Tsunade started beating them all and threw them outside the house. Don't try to force my little baby boy into your stupid summoning contracts. He is only 1 year old, for God's sakes, she shouted as she slammed the door, and the three stood up, cracking their sore bones as Enma turned to the two of them. What did I do wrong to get beaten like that? And damn, does she hit hard, he grumbled as the other two nodded and walked back to the village while Enma puffed into smoke and returned to the summoning realm. Kanahigaku no Sato. They returned to the village to attend the grand party that was thrown in honor of the hero Uzumaki twins. Kushina had arranged a massive party along with the support of the whole council as she waited for Kakashi and Jiraiya to arrive. Hiruzen was already there, but they were the closest friends of Minato, and she wanted them here. She saw them come into the party and walked up to them happily. Hey, where have you been? I've been waiting for you both all night, she said, and they both smiled, handing her the presents that she just kept aside and turned to them. They frowned at her lack of enthusiasm for their gifts as they remembered how Tsunade had given their presents to Naruto almost instantly, and respected them a lot. But they shrugged it off, seeing she already had a lot of them seeing the people at the party. Well, you see, Kushina, we went to Tsunade first to wish little Naruto there, and it took us a little while to return, though we tried our best to return on time, said Jiraiya, and Kakashi nodded with a nice smile, and she frowned at hearing about the two and nodded. So how is Tsunade and Naruto? She asked, and they noticed a little hesitation in her voice as she asked them about them. They are fine, but Tsunade just wanted to keep the whole affair simple, calling just those who were really close, and just a small get-together with a dinner. But we left as we had to come here first, said Jiraiya, and Kakashi just glanced around, seeing so many outstanding people around were a first for him, he mused, and that too only for a birthday party. So how is Naruto? She asked nervously, and they both looked at her, surprised by her blunt question as Jiraiya answered with a smile. Maybe she still had some hope left after all. He is great. I haven't seen a happier child, and Tsunade treats him like a teddy bear all the time. I swear he is too close to his mother already, he said, and Kushina frowned and felt a pang of jealousy in her heart. Jiraiya knew this would egg her on as he had seen her realize the mistake she had made a year back. Yes, the way he just relaxes in her arms is surprising, but I guess Tsunade-sama is a great mother. And Jiraiya-sama, is it true that he took his first steps yesterday? He asked. Jiraiya smiled, remembering the scene that had been etched onto his memory, and saw Kushina's curious eyes. His smile widened. Yes, I was there yesterday. Tsunade teased him by calling him to her arms and would step back and then call for him again. After a couple of tries, he took his first step, and Tsunade started crying from happiness. Naruto, seeing this, was saddened and took more steps to her just to wipe her eyes as it hurt him to see her cry, not knowing she was shedding tears of happiness. I am glad I took pictures of every moment yesterday. I'll gift it to her the next time I see her, he said as Kakashi was amazed at the story, and Kushina's heart broke as she heard the story and imagined her baby boy coming to her arms like that. She broke off those thoughts and walked away. Her mood was ruined as she walked up to her daughters. Kakashi looked confused while Jiraiya smiled sadly. How long will you hide the pain in your heart, Kushina? You were the one who pushed your son away, and now he loves Tsunade more than any other child loves his mother from what I've seen. Don't wait too much, or it might be a bit too late, Jiraiya thought as he left the party going towards the bar for some sake to honor the memory of his student that he was reminded of every time he saw his godson. A moment later, Kakashi jumped beside him, and he smiled at him knowingly. So you too, huh? He asked, and Kakashi nodded with a nice smile. Yes, he reminds too much of Sensei, doesn't he? He asked as Jiraiya smiled fondly, thinking of his godson. Indeed, he does, he said, and both of them entered the bar to drown their sorrows away. Back with Kushina. Come on, Mito-chan, Kara-chan. Come to Ka-chan, babies, Kushina said in a low, almost pleading tone. Hearing the news of the Senju family, Kushina upped her efforts to connect with her remaining children. However, it seemed that they paid no mind to the pleas of their mother as the twins continued to crawl around indiscriminately. With droplets forming around her eyes, she took hold of the girls and cried, "What have I done?" as she held her kids lovingly, slowly weeping as the party came to a close. Meanwhile, at the hidden Senju compounds, Tsunade and Shizen walked out of the kitchen with a freshly baked cake in their hands and saw Naruto sitting with Katsuyu, glomping her happily. Tsunade smiled at how much Katsuyu liked her little boy and was always happy to be summoned to just play with him. And Naruto loved her just as much, glomping her every chance he got. She put the cake on the table and crouched down on the carpet where the two were and smiled. Well, Naruto-chan, let poor old Katsuyu go, and let's cut your cake, alright? She said as Naruto let her go, and she picked him up as she smiled at Katsuyu. I'm sorry, Katsuyu, for all the trouble he causes you, she said, and Katsuyu too slugged up along with her to the table. It is no problem at all, Tsunade-sama. I really like spending time with little Naruto-kun here, she said in her melodic voice, causing Shizen and Tsunade to smile. They cut the cake and popped the party poppers as Naruto giggled and played happily as the celebrations at the Senju compounds came to an end when Naruto fell asleep in Tsunade's arms from exhaustion. The little family celebration ended on a happy note as they all slept the happiest they had been in a long time. Time skipped 1 year later. It was just another typical day at the Senju compounds as Tsunade sat in the living room reading Naruto a picture book as he had his wide, curious eyes fixed on the pictures as she read him the story. Tsunade thought about the last year while reading the book as her mind wandered off. Jiraiya and Kakashi had visited a couple more times, and Hiruzen also wanted to come over but was cooped up in work and stuck to sending her letters only. Jiraiya's visit was a bit peculiar last time since he had talked to her about Kushina. That was a topic she didn't want to talk about, but seeing as he insisted, she heard him out. He had told her that Kushina was starting to realize her mistakes, and her questions about how Naruto was doing and how his life was coming up or various other things were becoming more and more frequent. She had harshly told him not to take up that topic again, and he had obliged hesitantly. But a little fear sat down that day in the back of her mind that if she really did repent her mistake, then one day she might take her Naruto-chan away from her. She shook her head, clearing her thoughts when she felt Naruto rubbing her cheek softly and looking at her with those curious eyes. Tsunade realized she had spaced out and stopped reading. Her eyes softened at seeing his innocent face and involuntarily, her eyes watered at the thought of losing her baby boy. Ka-chan, Naruto said in his little voice, and her eyes widened as she wiped away her tears frantically. She instantly brought him close and kissed him on his cheek as she looked at him desperately. What did you just say, Naruto-chan? Can you say it again, please? She asked, and he nodded. Ka-chan, he said again, and she brought her son in a warm embrace as he snuggled into her, taking in her warmth and kissed her cheek softly, rubbing her tears away, making her smile. Shizen came up and saw the tear stains on her face, and was worried as she rushed to her. What's the matter, Tsunade-sama? She asked, and Tsunade beamed as she pointed to her son proudly. My little Naruto-chan just said his first words, isn't that right, Naruto-chan? She asked, and he grinned foxily, making him look adorable to the ladies. Ka-chan, he chirped happily, making Tsunade's heart flutter, and Shizen brought her hands to her face in shock as she ran up to them. Naruto-chan, can you say Nei-chan please? She asked, pleadingly, making Tsunade giggle. Naruto just tilted his head to the side in confusion as Shizen picked him up and kissed him on the cheek. Ka-chan, he chirped happily again, making Shizen groan and Tsunade laugh as all her fears lay forgotten, and she took him in her arms, and he lovingly nuzzled into her. Well, looks like he knows all the important words now, doesn't he, Naruto-chan? She asked, cooing as Naruto grinned and gave her a sloppy kiss on the cheek. Tsunade-sama, that's not really nice. He'll say my name too, just you see, said Shizen, puffing her cheeks, and Tsunade laughed. Hello ladies, how are you doing? I heard some commotion down here, said a new voice that Tsunade knew all too well, but she was also happy as her baby boy was cuddled in her arms and had given her the happiest moment of her life. His first words were for her, which couldn't make her happier. You always come here at the right time, you damn pervert, you really are lucky, you know? She said, and he looked at her curiously, wondering what she was talking about. Naruto-chan just said his first words a few moments ago, didn't you, Naruto-chan? She teased, and he snuggled in her neck from embarrassment, making her giggle. He was shy around other people other than her and Shizen and did this if she teased him in front of them. Really, is that right? He asked, not believing it when Naruto looked at him and smiled. Ka-chan, he chirped, and Jiraiya's eyes widened as he too rushed to him and took him in his arms, rubbing his cheek against his, smiling proudly, and crying anime tears. That's my godson, he said happily, making the ladies smile but ruined it a moment later. Now say comma make papa proud, he said giggling perversely, and a moment later Shizen took Naruto from his arms, making him whine as a beating ensued courtesy of a seething Tsunade. You damn pervert, when will you ever learn? Don't you dare try and corrupt my baby boy! She roared as Jiraiya's screams were heard all over the Senju compounds. No, not there, ah! He screamed as Shizen shook her head while Naruto looked at her, confused. You'll understand someday, Naruto-chan, she said with a smile, taking him in and getting him to try and say Nei-chan. A few minutes later, Tsunade came in smiling and dragging a half-dead Jiraiya with smoke coming out of him and put him on the floor as Naruto went near him and poked him with a bat, making Shizen giggle. Tsunade-sama, don't you think you went a bit overboard? Asked Shizen, and Tsunade waved her off. Oh, don't worry, he has built up a resistance to beatings over the years, and I didn't even go halfway through what I did to 7 years ago, she said as a moment later, Jiraiya stood up, looking fine as he dusted himself off. That's right. The great Toad Sage Jiraiya can't be put down by the hands of such a fine lady, he said, doing a strange dance, making the girls sigh and Naruto giggle and clap. Only you understand my true talent, my boy, he said, crying and hugging him as the ladies shook their heads. I'll never know why Naruto-chan likes that stupid dance so much, said Shizen, and Tsunade nodded but smiled a little. She was glad that Jiraiya was making so many efforts to bond with his godson as she saw him play with the new stuffed toads he brought, and Naruto giggling as he made some strange faces, making him laugh. She joined them in playing as Jiraiya suddenly stood up, motioning for her to follow him. He took her aside and followed, seeing his serious expression. What's the matter, Jiraiya? She asked, and he smiled sadly as he handed her an album that she took with a confused expression. That is the photo album and journal of Minato. I brought it here from the Namikaze mansion after I asked you for a bit of Naruto's blood the last time I came here, he said, and realization dawned on her face as to why he had asked for a bit of Naruto's blood. But why have you brought it here, Jiraiya? She asked, and he smiled at her confused expression. Tsunadeheim, Naruto's growing up and now he can speak too. He will grow as intelligent and powerful as his father was, of that I have no doubt. But he will start to ask you questions about his father some time from now. With all the books you read to him, I have seen his confusion and sadness when he reads stuff about a child's father. When he asks, you will have something that belonged to his father to show him, he said, and she nodded and took the album and journal to the archives in the basement, and kept them there, and sealed the room again. Choosing to bid the pervert farewell, Tsunade went back to go play with Naruto. As she ventured outside, she noticed the unkempt yard. Oddly enough, even after decades of neglect, the grass had managed to stay uniform and maintained, but now there were patches of grass that grew more vibrant, and areas of mud that appeared sporadically regardless of rainfall. In the end, she chalked up to be due to the presence of new life after years of solitude. As if their presence had boosted the nature's properties. 1 year later, Senju residence. The sound of laughing and running was heard all over the Senju compounds as Shizen stood cooking up the lunch in the kitchen and smiled at the joyful noise ringing in the compounds. It made her happy that Naruto made everything so lively here and was glad at the changes he had brought to her master. She no longer drowned in her sorrows and was actually entirely focused on raising Naruto, and seeing how wonderful a mother she was. Naruto-chan comes back here or else, she said, chasing the running blonde playfully with open arms, laughing a bit as she did so. He had an expensive bottle of sake and her cup in his hands as he ran. There's no way you'll catch me, Kaa-chan. He chirped happily as he ran with her sake bottle in his hands and was laughing as he made her chase him all around the compound. He suddenly tripped as he fell face first and skid a bit as the bottle broke, and Tsunade gasped. Naruto-chan! She shouted as she ran towards him and picked him up in her arms as she saw the pieces of the bottle embedded in his palms and the blood that seeped through it. Naruto-chan, how many times have I told you to be careful when you are running? She scolded a bit angrily as his eyes watered, and he held his head down, and a few tears dropped, seeing her so angry. He tried to pick up the broken pieces to see if he could fix it, and her eyes softened as he sobbed and picked up the pieces, collecting them in his bleeding hands. I'm sorry, the boy said timidly, thinking she was mad because he broke her bottle, and was startled as she scooped him up in her arms and held him close to her, as she made him drop all the pieces he had in his hands and rubbed his back gently, and he cried in the crook of her neck, whispering apologies and sobs. She cooed the little boy and soothed him, telling him it was all right. I wasn't angry because you broke the bottle, Naruto-chan. I was angry because you hurt yourself. I worry about you too much, so be careful from now on, alright? She asked softly, and he nodded as she kissed his tears away gently, and took his hands in hers softly as her hands were enveloped in green medical chakra. She started pulling out the pieces and healing his hands. Naruto winced from the pain, and she kissed his head as she kept healing him gently and held him close to her. Sure, it's alright, it won't even feel a little painful in a few moments, alright? She whispered gently, and his sobs stopped as she let go of his hands, and he looked at them, amazed that they were all fine already. Suga. Kaa-chan, how did you do that? Asked with glimmering eyes as he watched her amazed, and she giggled as she scooped him up in her arms. He chuckled as she twirled him around and held him close to her as he watched her curiously with wide cerulean eyes waiting for an answer. Well, Naruto-chan, that was your Kaa-chan's invention and a medical jutsu that helps me to heal most of the wounds like I just did with you, she said, and he tilted his head to the side cutely, getting him a kiss on the cheek, and he giggled. Kaa-chan, what's a medical jutsu? He asked, fumbling with the words making her giggle as she walked into the living room and put him on her lap as she brushed his hair softly and put her chin on his head, making him snuggle into her. She smiled as he looked up with those wide, curious eyes that were always eager to learn new things. A jutsu is a thing shinobi used to perform amazing things. Your Ka-chan is a specialist in medical jutsu, techniques that are used to heal people who are hurt badly. Do you understand Naruto-chan? She asked softly and tried to explain it in the simplest way possible. She saw him with a thoughtful expression on his face and let him absorb it all in, and after a moment, he nodded. Hi, you help people who are hurt with that awesome cool glowy hands thingy, he said, nodding sagely. She laughed at how he explained such a complicated thing in his own cute words. She kissed his head and brushed his hair as she held him close to her. Hi Naruto-chan, your Ka-chan can help people with the awesome cool glowy hands thingy, she said teasingly, and he looked down, embarrassed. I'm not so smart, am I? He whispered, and she smiled and brought his face up as she put a finger under his chin and kissed his forehead softly, and gave him a heart-warming smile. No, my Naruto-chan is really smart, you are just a little small now to understand these things. For now, we'll let you learn to read and write, alright? She said softly, and he nodded happily. Are you strong, Ka-chan? He asked, and she thought for a moment how to answer it. Well, I can hold my own against most people, and there are only a few people that can stand up to your Ka-chan, including that pervert Jiraiya. He may not look it, but he's powerful, she said, and his eyes widened. Really, Jiraiya Aji-san is that strong? He asked, and she nodded with a smile, and he frowned. There is no way he is stronger than you. You always beat him when he comes to meet us. Ka-chan is the strongest, he said in a determined voice, and she giggled and nodded as suddenly there was a puff of smoke and the sound of wood clattering, and Tsunade sighed. From east to west and north to south, the women fall to my feet and succumb to my charms. The legendary toad sage of empty Mayaboku Jiraiya has arrived, said Jiraiya, doing his strange dance on his samurai toad as Naruto beamed and clapped. Pervy sage, he said happily, and Jiraiya's face faltered, and Tsunade laughed wholeheartedly. Don't call me that, you damn brat, he said indignantly and huffed, and crossed his arms as Tsunade and Naruto giggled at him. That's a great name, Naruto-chan, call him that from now on, alright? She asked, and he nodded as Jiraiya's jaw dropped to the ground. Hey, my dear godson won't call me that now, will he? He asked hopefully as Naruto looked at him confused and tilted his head to the side cutely. Call you what, pervy sage? He asked innocently, and Tsunade snickered as he cursed under his breath and dispelled the toad. Shizen walked in and saw Jiraiya there and smiled as she served them some tea and all sat at the table. So Jiraiya, any special reason you came, or is it just a regular visit? She asked, and he frowned as he made a short signal towards Naruto that she caught and gave him a curt nod. Naruto-chan, can you go and play with Shizen for a while until I and Jiraiya talk? She asked. He was saddened as he sat on her lap and wrapped his arms around her neck. Do I have to go? He asked softly, and she smiled and brushed his hair softly. He never liked it whenever she sent him away to talk to Jiraiya personally, but these things were just not for him. She brought his face in front of her, cupping it in her hands as she smiled at him. Please, Naruto-chan, we'll be done shortly. This is something for us adults, and it would make you bored, so you go and play with Shizen, and we'll be with you shortly, alright? She asked softly, and he nodded and kissed her on the cheek as Shizen took him by his hand to the clan grounds. Jiraiya smiled as he saw the interaction between the two and couldn't be happier. So what is it, Jiraiya? She asked, and he snapped his attention back to her and turned serious. Tsunade, I'll be straight, Kushina has asked me if you could maybe come back to the village so she could meet Naruto, he said bluntly, and Tsunade immediately stiffened, and her face turned emotionless. And why would I want to do that? She asked coldly, and he flinched under her gaze and knew how protective she was of Naruto. Well, she has realized the mistake she made in her grief and sorrow and is repenting what she did. She wants to meet her son. He was cut off as Tsunade interrupted him. My son, she added coldly, and he nodded as he continued. Yes, well, and she wanted to meet up with him and make up for all the lost time, he said, and she stared at him blankly, not giving away any emotions, and was silent for a few moments. And you honestly believe me to return to the village so that she could meet the boy who she threatened to kill as an infant? You believe I would risk Naruto-chan's safety and let him see the villagers' glares just because she feels repentance? What will I do when Naruto-chan asks me the reasons for what happened all those years ago? Will he be able to understand and stand the burden he holds? She asked in an icy tone, and he grimaced, knowing every point she made was right. But Tsunade is reasonable, she is his mouth. He gulped as she leaked her killing intent and continued. She wants to make amends, and her guilt is genuine, and he will have to return and face the village someday. Even Sarutobi-sensei believes you should let him meet her. Don't worry, Anbu will escort you, and he won't even see the villagers, I guarantee you, he said in a desperate tone to persuade her to return, and she just stared at him icily. No, she said coldly, and cut him off before he could protest. I don't care whatever you or that old monkey thinks. I won't let Naruto-chan near Kushina or that village until I see it fit, or if I ever see it fit. I don't care if she feels guilt, or whatever the hell she feels. You all are selfish. No one thinks of what effect it might have on my little boy. You just want what is best for you. I'll keep my boy safe here until I think he is ready to learn the truths and lay it out gently," she said with finality, leaving no room for arguments. "But that is his home. He belongs in the village," he pleaded, and she glared at him. "He belongs here in my arms and safety. He will return to the village if he ever wants to, and if he doesn't want to do something, then Cammy herself will have to first go through my punches before touching my boy," she said, and he knew she wouldn't change her mind. "And I know this isn't the only reason you said this, is it, Jiraiya?" she asked, and he grimaced at being caught. "Well, Tsunadeheim, the village is requesting you back after it leaked out that you have left the shinobi forces and adopted Naruto. The villagers, after knowing that you are living happily with him after all these years, are willing to accept him, and the council, too, along with the elders, are willing to accept him back with open arms," he said, and she silently took it, and Jiraiya continued, knowing this was his chance. "And Tsunade, the village needs you back. They are willing to implement the medical plans you laid down, and want the Senju clan to represent." He was cut off as Tsunade spoke up. "That's it. You don't want Naruto or me back, you want what we represent. You want the Senju clan head, and it's their back. You want to show that the village still stands strong with me in it," she said, and he opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "And let me guess, the council found out that Minato left all of his knowledge to his son, and they want the feared Namikaze back with them. I know the Uzumaki twins haven't inherited any of their father's genes and are Uzumakis in every sense of the word, and now that they realize what they have lost in Naruto, they want him back. The council doesn't want the Senju fortune to be lost from the village, while the villagers will do anything to keep the founder clan of Konoha in the village," she said, and he looked down ashamed as she kept every point in front of him correctly. He always knew that she was good at political matters, and this proved it. "Naruto and I will return if and only if we want to return. I won't force him into anything he doesn't want to do. I'll train him a bit so that he can have enough skills to protect himself, but if he doesn't want to be a shinobi, so be it," she said, and his eyes widened as he started to speak, but she stood up. "Leave, Jiraiya, and this is the last time I'll let it slide, since I know the council forced you and Sarutobi-sensei into this. But if you ever come with this sort of a thing to me again, I'll cut all ties with you," she said icily, and left the room, leaving an ashamed Jiraiya behind. He clenched his fists, and cursed those damn elders and the council that put him up to this and ruined the already volatile image that Tsunade held for him after his hesitation at adopting Naruto. He stood up and left towards Konoha to report this to the council, and suddenly smiled. He would be smiling smugly when he smashed Tsunade's answer in their faces. Tsunade walked out and let her emotionless mask drop as she sighed tiredly, feeling drained, and walked through the hallways towards the living room and took out a bottle of water and drank it, crushing it in her hands from the anger she felt, and let her killing intent loose at those damn elders. She knew those bastards were the ones behind all of this. She felt a tug on her kimono and looked down to see a whimpering Naruto clutching to her leg, and let her killing intent disappear as she picked him up and cradled the sniffing boy in her arms. She scolded herself for allowing loose her emotions and scaring him and rubbing his back gently, calming him down. "Ka-chan, are you angry?" he asked softly, and she smiled and kissed the top of his head as she sat on the porch of the house with him cuddled up on her lap. "No, Naruto, I was angry, but you took it all away. You always give your Ka-chan a lot of strength, you know that?" she asked, and he looked at her with wide, curious eyes and smiled happily. "Really?" he asked. She smiled and nodded as he wrapped his arms around her neck and kissed her on her cheek and snuggled into her neck. She smiled as she wrapped him up in her arms. She would never let anyone do anything to him as long as she had her eyes on him, she promised, and would save his innocence for as long as she could. "So Naruto, let's begin your writing practice now, alright?" she asked. He nodded as she picked him up and walked into the traditional Japanese living room and sat on the cushion, pulling out the calligraphy kit that her grandmother used to use, and rubbed the stone on the calligraphy set's ink equipment to create some fresh ink. "Alright, Naruto, I explained this to you last time, right? Now show me how to rub this stone to create ink properly," she said to the boy on her lap, who nodded and picked up the stone and started rubbing it carefully the way she showed him, and she smiled. "That's very good, now let's start your calligraphy practice then," she said, and he nodded as he picked up the brush and put his tongue out and had a frown of concentration on his face, with his tongue sticking out a bit as he drew the same kanji carefully that she drew. She was starting his writing skills and combining it with the calligraphy art, as her grandmother did when she was younger. She saw his strokes were a lot sloppy, but there was an improvement. They went it for a couple of hours before Naruto started getting tired and rubbed his eyes as they showed he was tired, and she pulled him back, pressing her closer to him and wrapped him up in her arms. "So is Naruto tired?" she asked softly as she put her cheek against his after kissing it, and he nodded, making her smile. "Well, you did very well today, Naruto, and I am proud of you," she said, and he grinned foxily and turned around in her arms and snuggled into her embrace as he yawned and put his head on her shoulder, holding him close to her, rubbing his back softly as his eyes drooped from exhaustion. A few minutes later, he fell asleep, and she picked him up and went to her room, tucking him in her bed and kissed his forehead, and went out. She was surprised at the rate he was improving and knew he was taking after his Uzumaki heritage in the calligraphy arts, and may even want to pursue sealing one day. She walked out and saw Shizen coming in with bags in her hands and smiled. She wondered where she was all this time, and now she knew she was out shopping. How did the writing practice go, Tsunade-sama? She asked as they walked into the kitchen, and she smiled. He is improving at an outstanding rate. My grandmother's trick still comes in handy, you know, even after all these years. He's learning how to write and getting calligraphy practice at the same time. Mitoba-chan used to do this with me to help if I ever decided to pursue sealing, but it was never my field of expertise. I have some skill in it, but not that much, she said, and Shizen looked at her, surprised. I didn't know you knew Fuinjutsu, Tsunade-sama, she said, surprised, and Tsunade nodded. Well, having the Uzumaki clan heiress as your grandmother certainly has its perks, she said, and Shizen nodded. Both of them had dinner and finished it as Tsunade stood up and was helping Shizen with the dishes when she felt a tug on her kimono and looked down to see Naruto rubbing his eyes and looking at her sleepily. She picked him up as he yawned cutely and snuggled up in her arms. What's the matter, Naru-chan? She asked, and he snuggled more, and she heard him sniffing and was worried as she felt him sobbing a bit. Did you have a nightmare? She asked softly, and he nodded a little as she rubbed his back and calmed him down. There was a big fox with so many tails, and he was running and destroying everything, Ka-chan, he said softly, and she stiffened as she held him tighter to herself. She glanced at Shizen, who wasn't paying attention to her, and walked into her room and sat on the bed with Naruto in her arms. A big fox, you say? Did he say something to you? She asked softly, and he nodded. Yes, he said that he'd make me see the truth, but I don't know what he meant, and then he laughed, and I was so scared, he said, trembling, and she cradled close to her, cooing him. Shinera-chan, there is nothing to worry about, I am here for you, she said softly, and he fell asleep crying as she put him to bed and lifted his shirt softly, gazing at his stomach. She saw that the seal was perfectly fine and sighed in relief. She had read Minato's notes on the seal and knew there was no way the fox could contact him unless he accessed his mindscape. It was just the process of the seal strengthening itself over time that must have let some memories of the fox seep through. That meant that Naruto's chakra coils were now beginning to develop, and she smiled. She laid down beside him, and he cuddled up against her with a small smile as she wrapped him in her arms. Later in Kanehigakure no Sato, Hokage office, Jiraiya entered the office through the window, and saw Hiruzen sitting and puffing his pipe and the three esteemed elders waiting for him. He made himself known with a small cough as Hiruzen smiled at his student. Jiraiya, I was waiting for you, so how did it go? He asked and noticed Jiraiya's flinch and sighed. She burned me off, sensei, didn't even listen to one reason, and deducted everything from the elders and council's plan to Kushina's plea to meet Naruto. She said that if Naruto didn't want to become a shinobi or return to the village, she wouldn't let anyone force him into anything. And this is the last time I have done this for you. She has threatened me that another attempt, and she would cut off all ties with me. He spat the last sentence venomously at the three Koots, who flinched and looked down. This is bad, Hiruzen, the Senju clan belongs in the village. Do something, said Danzo, and Hiruzen stared at him blankly. And pray, do tell, what do you want me to do? She isn't a part of the shinobi forces anymore and is an honored retired Sannin. She is the clan head of the Senju, the most powerful clan of the Hidden Leaf. If she wants, then she could go to the daimyo himself, and he would definitely help her with the prestige the Senju clan still holds. You all should have thought of that before ostracizing and glaring at her son, he said icily, and the three flinched as Koharu protested. But the child is the Namikaze clan heir along with the Senju. He belongs in the village. He needs to form bonds in the village, and the whole village is now willing to accept him, seeing as he is living peacefully with the slug princess herself, and see that he couldn't be the demon, and want both of them back, she said, and the other two nodded while Hiruzen shook his head. He still didn't understand how they got a sniff of Minato's knowledge being passed on to Naruto, but he regretted the leak now. There is nothing I could do now, the matter is out of my hands. This is the last time I have listened to the suggestion of the council on this matter. He will return with Tsunade if, and when he wants to. Your forcing is only making matters worse, he said as Hamura and Koharu started to protest but put his hand up silencing them. I've heard and said enough, this matter is closed, you've heard her decision, now leave, he said, and they glared and stood up, walking out. Danzo was seething on the inside. That damn monkey had let too much freedom to be enjoyed by Tsunade, and now he didn't have the chance to manipulate the boy to his way and use his influence and power to gain. The boy held the knowledge of his father along with the importance of the Senju, and would have been a useful pawn to him after failing to get his hands on the twin Uzumaki sisters. He had tried to get the children trained by him, but Sarutobi had ruined it by saying that Kushina, being a former Jinchuriki, was a better teacher than he ever could be. He plotted other ways to get some power and walked into his deep underground lair. A moment later, Jiraiya turned to Hiruzen and glared at the man. You knew this would happen, didn't you? He asked, and Hiruzen smirked and nodded. Of course I did. I have to lead the village through 2 wars and am called the professor for a reason. I know this game of politics better than those 3 could ever play. I knew Tsunade would slap a no on your face and rub it in their faces. They have gained too much power on the council, and this will remind them of their place. I'll strip them of their newfound influence slowly and re-establish the village with the will of fire that it has always held. I am proud that Tsunade sniffed each of their ploys as I expected her to, he said, and Jiraiya smiled slightly at his sensei. That was his plan. He wanted to build the same amount of power he held before he retook the position to call Tsunade back in a safe village. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and both looked at each other perplexed at who could it be at such a late hour in the night. Come in, said Hiruzen, and in walked Kushina with a smile, and their smiles dropped, and Jiraiya groaned inwardly, seeing her happy face that was about to be destroyed. Jiraiya, I am glad I found you here. I came to ask Hiruzen about you tebeing, she said happily, and he smiled sadly at her enthusiasm. So when is Tsunade-chan bringing back Naruto-chan? She chirped happily, and both the men averted their eyes, and her smile dropped at seeing their reactions. What's wrong? She asked, and Jiraiya took a deep breath and spoke up. Kushina, things aren't the way you imagine them to be, he said sadly, and she frowned a bit confused. What do you mean? She asked, not understanding the problem, and he sighed. Well, Kushina Tsunade has refused to return to the village or let you meet Naruto until she believes the time is right, he said, and Kushina's eyes widened in shock. What, but I am his mas. She was interrupted as Hiruzen interjected. Was his mother, he said icily, and her eyes watered. That was a mistake. I was drowned in sorrow and grief, and I took it all out on Naruto-chan. But I am willing to make amends now, she said, and both men shook their heads. It isn't that easy now, Kushina. You evicted Naruto, and Tsunade adopted him. She isn't some ordinary civilian that we could push around for you. She is the head of the Senju clan, and Naruto is the current heir of her clan now. He is under her protection, and we couldn't touch a hair on him without her permission, or the whole fire capital will be rumbled. There is a reason the Senjus are so respected in the land of fire, said Hiruzen. She glared furiously at the man. She is trying to use her influence to keep me away from him? I am the clan head of the Uzumaki clan head too, you know. She knows that Naruto will come to me and is purposely trying to keep me away from him, she said, and Hiruzen sighed, knowing her stubbornness, but she needed to face the facts, and she has every right to do so. He is her son, whether you want to admit it or not, and she blindly loves him. I cannot do anything in the matter since she doesn't belong to the shinobi forces and isn't under my command. Either does she come under the civilian council seeing her prestigious clan status. We cannot interfere in clan affairs anyways, and as for you being the Uzumaki clan head and challenge her, you could do so, but I am pretty sure we both know who the feudal lord will side against, he said calmly, and a tear rolled down her eye. Kushina just waits, that is all you can do. Give her time and let her see that Naruto needs to meet you, and she will do it. She doesn't hold any hatred for you personally, but she is really protective of Naruto and is afraid to hurt him. At least you have come to realize your mistakes and want to repent. You'll get your chance, don't worry, he said calmly in an attempt to calm her down. But I want to meet him. His childhood is slipping away from my fingers. What would Minato say that I abandoned our only son because of my stupidity? How will I face him, Jiraiya? I hate myself for abandoning my own son to hide from my pain, and now I can't even meet him, she said as she cried in her hands, and he hugged her with one arm and consoled the crying woman. Hiruzen smiled sadly, knowing the decision lay with Tsunade. He also wanted her to come back and have Naruto live here, but knew this wasn't the time for her or Naruto to return, and they could only wait and watch what the future held in store for them. That night, back at the Senju residence, Naruto awoke not in his house, but somewhere he had never been before, yet the metallic corridor lined with pipes he found himself and felt oddly familiar. Recalling the events of the night, he remembered going to his mom because of a nightmare, and her holding him. So I must be dreaming, the blonde thought to himself as he explored the tunnel. Further down, he came to a fork in the path that diverged two ways. One led to a closed door, while the other led to a more open room with a majority of the pipes leading to and fro. Deciding that the open path seemed more relaxed, he chose to head down that way. After a few minutes of travel, Naruto reached the HUB, as it were, where all the pipes converged and led off into countless directions. At the center of this room, a larger pipe from which all other pipes splintered off of, Naruto chose to follow this pipe to a door and opened it. Once opened, the door glowed with the bright purple light, and the luminosity of the energy source temporarily blinded Naruto. Quickly shutting the door, Naruto returned to the fork by feeling around until his sight fully returned. This time weary of doors, Naruto squinted and pushed forward. This time to his relief the dimly lit room held a hallway of doors, 3 to be exact. Each entry had hinges on his side, signifying that he had to pull to open. However, 2 doors had no handle for him to grasp. The two, one way, both had an image of a swirling flame, the Uzumaki crest but with a peak on the top to represent the land of fire and not whirlpools, and each held on half of the yin-yang. Putting that information aside as he couldn't access it, his focus shifted to the third door. This one too had a swirl, but this one at its center was a 9 whose tail spiraled around it in 9 distinct lines entrapping it. Once again, wary of what's behind the door, he he cautiously proceeded. Just as the room came into view, Naruto burst into a fit of laughter. He couldn't explain what brought this on, but as he convulsed in bliss, he once again found himself somewhere he was not previously. This time, however, he found himself in his mother's bed, being tickled by said smirking mother. "It's about time you wake up, sweetie," she said in a giddy and loving manner. "Did you have any more bad dreams, honey?" Tsunade asked, trying to not bring down his mood. None that I can think of. I had a dream, but I was just walking around," the blonde boy said, trying to remember his dream last night but could only remember a tunnel he was walking through. 1 year later, hidden Senju compounds. In the early hours of the morning, the Senju residents could be found in one of two states, tranquility or chaos. Today happened to be the latter, as two blondes could be seen running around the front porch. Tsunade had been chasing the young boy for roughly half an hour, who seemed to give no hint of stopping anytime soon. "Naruto, it is too early for this sh-." The irate mother exclaimed, doing her best to avoid swearing at her son. "Come back here now before I start to cry." She smirked as the kid stopped in his tracks and waited for his mom to reach him. "I'm sorry, Ka-chan. Please don't cry. I didn't even think about how you felt. I'm so sorry, Ka-chan," the boy said, shuddering, truly believing he emotionally wounded his mother. "It's okay, honey, so long as you're sorry," she said as they embraced and entered the house, finally restoring the peace. "I understand you want to use that overflowing energy you have, but pulling pranks on Shizen and me isn't the solution. Though I am proud you can use stealth, please don't use it on us, okay?" she rationalized to the young boy, who had begun a streak of pranks on the other residents of the household. "So, to help you with this problem, I say we change our schedule a bit. How about when you wake up, you prepare a light snack like toast with jam for the 2 or 3 of us, and we warm up with a light jog early in the morning, then we come back, have a good shower, and enjoy breakfast, and then begin your writing practices so you can use this energy to your benefit. We can even begin with basic workouts to help prep your body for growth. How does that sound?" Tsunade offered in hopes of restarting her physical training to make sure she doesn't get rusty and to start prepping Naruto for the conditioning required to use his father's taijutsu. "That sounds amazing, Ka-chan, then we all get up and enjoy time together, yay!" The ball of pure sunshine beamed. Later in the day, once everything had calmed, the two blondes could be seen finishing up the youth's writing practice. While at this age, most would be expected to practice freely, and by experience, since Naruto was learning by 2 writing styles, pen and paper and brush and scroll. The 2 mediums required different skills to master, and to make sure he could survive in both the ninja world and the regular one, he needed to know both. Once the hour was over, Naruto had the day to run, play, and do just about anything, so long as it wouldn't hurt him. Tsunade was really trusting of the boy, especially after the last time he had injured himself. The sight of her crying probably hurt more than the glass. After some time, Tsunade sat at the table, planning a workout regimen for her family and to progressively lead to ninja training, if her son chooses to go that route. The sound of the door opening alerted her to reality. Believing it to be her son, she happily pronounced back, "So soon, sweetie," only to turn her head and want to throw up. Well, my charms are finally working there, ma dash." The figure was interrupted by a chakra-fueled fist, sending him right out the door he came from. After pulling himself out of the rubble that used to be a stone fence, Jiraiya pulled himself together and tried to compose himself as he re-entered the house, this time with his hands in the air to signify surrender. "Well, now that we got our greetings taken care of, care to hear what I have to say, Haim?" the resilient toad sage said, unfazed by his treatment. "Look, I'm sorry, what do you want, Jiraiya?" Tsunade said, embarrassed by her mistaking him for her precious ball of sunshine. "Well, I know you want Naruto to progress when he's ready, and I respect that, but I just want to make a suggestion or two you may not like. He's 4 now, so I don't expect you to begin training him brutally, or anything, but I would recommend some conditioning so that when the time comes, he is not like a fish out of water." Jiraiya started with the more agreeable of the two. "You'd be surprised I was already planning out our exercise routine for that exact purpose," Tsunade said quite cheerfully, getting one up on her teammate. "Okay, that brings me to my second proposition, and I'm going to ask that you don't interrupt me and hear what I have to say. When the time comes for him to begin his training, I would like for him to sign the toad contract." He waited to gauge her response. She shook a little but overall was pretty restrained. He pressed forward. "While I can see why you would want him to sign the slug contract, seeing as he is your son, I would like to counter by saying this will give him a connection to his father. And I'm not just saying this to emotionally guilt you into letting me train him. Still, by the looks of it, he might become a medic. That being said, without the added bonus of the QB chakra, he is just a person. I want to give him some allies with variety: battle toads, espionage toads, messenger toads. This way, while he is healing, he can be defended, he can be alerted when someone approaches, and even have a more secure messaging system than by bird." Jiraiya laid his reasoning out for the mother to hear. Once again, the room was silent as you could see Tsunade enter deep thought, before forming her response to this claim. While it is true that slugs only come in 2 forms, healing and communication, the latter relied on a second slug to be summoned and left behind, while toads could use their system to transport to cover vast lands and were more capable of swift movements. "You raised some good points, Jiraiya, but I'm still not convinced. However, It really isn't my choice in the end. I will consider letting Naruto have the option to sign the contract over mine, but until I decide it will be better for him, the matter lies with him. I only ask that you stop trying to bribe him. You can continue to play with him, but for now, give it some time, she said sagely and walked out to go play with her Naruto. At the Uzumaki household the next day, Mito and Kara have just returned home from their early morning excursion. As they quietly sneak back upstairs, they hear a creak, thinking it was one of them that both shush each other, taking another step. Again, the creak happens, but louder this time. They know it wasn't either of them. Turning slowly towards the living room, they were met by their worst fear. A demon that can put the Ninetales to shame, a force of nature so fierce and terrifying that no one, not even Uncle Jiraiya, can stand up to. They were face to face with the infamous Red Devil of the Leaf, Kushina Uzumaki, better known as, in this house, their mother. After a terrifying scream, the room was brought to an uncomfortable silence as their mother did nothing but stare at them, smiling. A minute passed, and Kushina broke the silence with a simple question. So what have you girls been up to? She questioned, feigning ignorance. After another pause, Mito got her senses back in line and responded. Oh, nothing, we were out training, just going for a little run, practicing our stealth, nothing much, Databeo, she lied smoothly. Yeah, just a little bit of training before breakfast, so we can be more amped for our lessons, Databesa, Kara joined in, hoping to make their lies sound more authentic. Really? Well, I guess I was wrong. I'll just have to call all the houses that called me saying they saw two red-headed girls fleeing from a house and tell them it wasn't you, and the call about a house being painted bright red and orange with swirls everywhere. Kushina began slowly, only to eventually pick up her anger as her hair formed 9 even bunches and began to float. After an hour of screaming, thank Kami for sound silencing seals, Kushina managed to catch and lecture her kids, not for going out and pranking, she would be a hypocrite for doing that, but for getting caught. This confused the daughters as they assumed they were going to be reprimanded for their actions. After an hour of lecturing on how she can protect them if they get caught, and not lead a prank back to themselves, she gave them a hug. After the hug, the girls realized they couldn't move. Looking down, they saw that their mom had tied them up. What? Was all they could say before Kushina sat them down and went into the kitchen to make food. After she was done, she brought them the food and fed them. They ate hesitantly, knowing how vindictive their mother could be. Once the meal was over, the sun had already risen, and there was a knock at the door. An Aburaim clan member walked in. The girls were even more confused than before. They threw a look to their mother, who just smiled. The Aburaim spoke up in an uninteresting manner. I am Shibi Aburaim. Your mom called me on the phone earlier saying you girls were more interested in your studies and wanted to go over the intricacies of chakra and chakra theory. The man's explanation filled the girls in on the punishment their mother had in store. After several hour-long explanations that would restart if one of them lost focus for too long and couldn't answer a question asked, the twins had steam shooting from their ears, as their brain had been overworked by the details they could not yet comprehend. They were given permission to sleep by their mother, who thanked the Aburaim for the lecture and said she'd give him a call if the girls ever needed a class on entomology, the study of insects. Since the twins were out of commission for the day, the Uzumaki matriarch had a quiet afternoon. She cleaned, studied some seals, worked out, had a shower and sat down for some relaxation, but as soon as she found the sweet spot on the couch, there was a knock on the door. Come in, she hollered, not even thinking about moving from her resting place. Tough day? Asked the toad sage as he entered and saw Kushina snuggling into the chair. Mind if we have a chat, it's important? Knowing that there were fewer chances he'd be punched through a wall put him at ease. The seriousness/sincerity in his voice got her attention. Taking her attentiveness as a sign to continue, he did so well. It's about legacy. I am the sole wielder of the toad summoning contract. Before all this happened, it was just me and Minato. Since he was an orphan and I never had kids, he was like my son, and to pass down the contract to him was to pass down my legacy. I'd like to continue the legacy so that when I pass, the toads still have a proper sage. All things considered, when the girls have enough control, I'd like to have them join the contract to continue Minato's legacy. Jiraiya was almost brought to tears by his speech. He meant every word of what he said. The only reason he didn't give that speech to Tsunade was that it wouldn't be very useful. While Jiraiya was tearing up, Kushina was bawling her eyes out. The idea her kids could have a tie to their father was a must. She would stop at nothing to ensure they could feel closer to their deceased father. I understand, and I accept when it is time they will be signing that contract. And I know for a fact that Minato thought of you as a father too. I mean, it's the whole reason we named him Naruto, because of you. At this declaration, even Jiraiya was crying unbeknownst to the sleeping girls in the room above. The girls, too tired to do anything else, went straight to bed and remained that way until their brains could heal enough to function again. Both redheads would soon begin to learn more about themselves. Kara began to shake awake, and she began to regain her vision. Feeling around, she discovered she was in a narrow pathway lined with pipes, both massive and small. She couldn't see the end of the hall she found herself in. Given she had just awoken here, she assumed Mito had placed her here while she slept. Vowing vengeance on her sister, she began her trek through the corridor in hopes of finding an exit to someone to show her one. After 30 minutes, she decided this place had to be abandoned since it was devoid of all life except her. At the end of that 30 minutes, she finally approached a diverging path, one to a door, and the other was a hallway lined with more pipes and an open room with an air of mystery. Her curiosity piqued, so she decided to go to the open path. Along the way, she found a round room with many pipes diverging to many pathways and one central one feeding the rest. Following the big one, she reached a door, or rather a gate as it stood taller than her house. Pushing the open, even a smidge proved difficult as the winds behind said door threw her back, and a bright light enveloped her. As soon as it was opened, the door shut itself. Deciding not to deal with the door at the moment, she decided to backtrack to the other door. Behind this door the outcome was more mundane and simply found 3 doors. Each door was decorated differently. One had a swirling flame with the yin half of the yin yang, one had a 9 surrounded by 9 lines in the yang half of the yin yang, and the last one had the weirdest symbol she had ever seen. It was like a sideways flame, with a line piercing it, and on the other end of it was another spiral. See the Senju crest, but imagine the left side is an Uzumaki swirl. Taking a look at the 2 outer doors, she went to touch the symbols. The swirl seemed to show her sister. While they were nearly identical, Mito most looked like her mother, with a rounder face and less vibrant hair. The odd-looking symbol, when touched, showed a taller blonde boy with spiky hair and blue eyes, but that was all she could see as the vision came in a flash and disappeared just as fast. Both doors lacked handles, but the last entry had a doorknob. Too curious, she pushed forward, and a deafening roar pushed her back. Both Uzumaki girls woke up simultaneously and looked at each other. Mito/Kara. I just had the craziest dream, and you were in it, and I think I saw Dad. Both girls finished, creeping each other out as they must have had the same dream. Both Jiraiya and Kushina busted into the girls' room, startling them to no end. Girls, what's wrong? We heard a scream, Kushina said as she ran to comfort her kids. What happened, sweeties? Well, we fell asleep and they explained what had happened to them, reaching the part about seeing each other in their respective dreams. And then we went to touch the other door and saw a tall figure with blonde hair like the sun and deep blue eyes. We think we saw Dad. Both girls finished explaining what they remembered about their dreams. Jiraiya, being the most experienced with the seal Minato used, and Kushina, a previous Jinchuriki, understood what had happened and knew it was time to tell them about their status and why they are part of the hero family. From the sounds of it, you entered your mindscape, a place where your chakra is visualized and stored. Those pipes you saw were your chakra coils, and the door you couldn't open must have been your reserves since your Uzumaki. It's no surprise it was hard to open. Now for the harder part to explain, Jiraiya looked to Kushina to continue. Sweeties, do you know why we are part of a hero family? Kushina asked just to be sure. Yeah, because Dad killed the Kyuubi. Mito said, well, honey, you're close. No one, not even your super strong father, can kill a tailed beast. This shook the girls to their core. They couldn't understand what their mother meant by that. You see, a bijou like the Nine Tails is a being made purely of chakra. And you can't kill chakra. You can only seal it. Your father gave his life to stop the Kyuubi, and to do so he sealed both halves of its chakra into you, making you into a Jinchuriki. Your dad must have sealed some of his own chakra to see you once you entered your mindscape. This bombshell hit both girls relatively softly. They were surprised to know they held demon chakra. But since they have been treated so nicely, it didn't really affect them. They were just happy to have seen their father. Now that you know of your status, we must begin your training properly. I was going to wait until you turned 5, but now we will focus on your taijutsu and sealing practices when I think you've progressed enough. We will attempt to unlock your chakra and begin your ninja training properly. Then when the school year comes around, you will join the Ninja Academy, the Hokage's office. Typically entering the office from the window would be considered an attack on the Hokage no matter who it is. That is unless you are his student, Jiraiya. He snuck in so many times the Umbu stopped trying to stop him as the Hokage would just dismiss them. But making his usual entrance, Jiraiya bid the Hokage a greeting and sat down in the chair in front of his desk. Sensei, you would not believe my luck these past 2 days. I got Tsunade to consider letting Naruto sign the Toad Contact. Instead of the slugs, she said it would be his choice unless she felt that my option would be better. So as long as I keep Naruto interested, I basically got him to succeed me, and on the opposite front Kushina promised that the girls would sign it too. Jiraiya proclaimed in victory to his teacher, who had been doing paperwork since he entered. Jiraiya, I'm proud really, it's just that this paperwork sucks all the joy out of me. Hiruzen had been telling the truth, he was really happy for the Toad Sage. But man did this paperwork suck his soul out, I'm too old for this shit. His student boomed with laughter at his expense. Sensei, I think having all the kids under the same contract will push the families to connect to each other again. Having their kids train together, and the meeting might be the thing that closes the gaps, Jiraiya proclaimed with joy as he saw his sensei smile for a second only to turn the pages and look constipated. Alright, I'll let you get back to work. A few months later, Senju residence. Due to high rains, the Senjus haven't been able to keep up with their morning jogs. But finally, after a month of rain, they were all ready to go out and enjoy the early morning dew, without being pelted by rain. Usually, it wouldn't have bothered Tsunade, a Sannin, or Shizen, her apprentice, but having Naruto tag along meant that there was a higher chance of him getting sick or getting hurt since he doesn't know how to use chakra to stick to the floor better or use it to slick the rain right off of him. Since it was such a lovely day in the fall, the leaves were falling like beautiful burnt orange, and the breeze was a nice touch as they worked up a sweat. As they neared the first half of their trek, a charming little town not too far away from where they would go and buy their groceries and other little necessities that they didn't need to go to a major village or town for. The town of Yuki sat in a valley between two mountains that were rumored to be training spots for the first and second Hokage before forming the Hidden Leaf. As they made their approach, they noticed the smell of rotting wood, and as they arrived at the main entrance, they could visibly see why the scent had been so strong. Due to the heavy rains, the town had been subject to frequent flooding over the past month. This deeply saddened all members of the Senju clan as they proceeded through the town to see if anyone required help. Several families could be seen packing up their belongings, or rather what's left of them, as they could no longer live in their homes. People gathered at what seemed to be the community center. Once there, Tsunade, Shizen, and Naruto asked around to see what had happened and if there was anything they could do immediately to help the people. After helping a few dozen people move, Tsunade felt the need to go to the local clinic to see if they could use help in that field. As they approached the rundown clinic, they could tell that this place had been a victim of neglect long before the storms came to town. This clinic was the only source of medicine and healing for miles upon miles, yet the state it was in was appalling for the family of healers. "This is bad, we need to do something for these people," Naruto spoke up. "Ka-chan, we need to do something, we can help, right?" "Right, Ne-chan?" the ever-generous Naruto offered. Seeing as there was no one there, headed back to the town center to look for the mayor or something akin to that. When they got to the mayor's office, they noticed there was a rather long line, no doubt, people concerned about where they would be living, how they will make money, and what to do with the sick and injured. After explaining to the receptionist what they wanted to do, she expedited their wait to next in line. Once the mayor was available, they were called in, much to everyone else's ire, for now, that is. The mayor of Yuki was a tall, fair-skinned woman of around 30. "Hello, I'm Suki Suzuki, and I'm in charge of what's left of this town. I heard you want to help us. Can I know who you are?" She introduced herself politely. "Well, I am Tsunade Senju, this is Shizen Kato Senju, and my son Naruto Senju. We are medics and saw the disaster that took place here. I happen to come from a prominent clan from the Land of Fire, and also want to contribute some resources for the relief efforts," she said as she unsealed a purse and began writing a banknote for a decent donation of Ryo for the mayor to use in reconstruction. While in the meeting, they also made the decision that the first of the efforts should be the clinic so that the family would be able to better help the people who have been affected. Oswell can come in town from time to time to heal anyone, and with that, they continued their jog home, knowing that they would be busy with the efforts to contribute very soon. 1 year later, hidden Senju compounds. Tsunade sat on the porch of the riverside in the compounds as she heard the splashing of water, and the giggling by her little blonde bundle. "Come on, Kichi, let's go and beat Pervy Sage. Come on, Pervy Sage, let's see who reaches the shore near Ka-chan first," shouted Naruto as he sat on a toad that was as tall as Tsunade's shoulders. She smiled as she saw the cheerful bundle of joy, riding the orange toad happily. "Whatever you say, Naruto, we ain't gonna be beaten by the likes of that pervert," said Gamakichi as Tsunade, and Shizen giggled. "Hey, show me some respect, you damn brats. I'll show you both, let's go, Gama, we'll beat these brats, and show them what the legendary toad sage Jiraiya can do," he said indignantly, and Gama, his personal samurai toad, croaked in agreement as they both rode their rides, and rushed from their sides of the shore towards Tsunade. Both raced at full speeds as Naruto laughed happily. "Let's go, Kichi. Don't you dare slow down," he said as his blonde hair flowed in the wind with the water splashing his face as both of them raced to the shores. Both were nearly at the same speed and were converging on the coast at full speed. Jiraiya made Gama slow down at the last moment for a safe stop, but Naruto urged Gamakichi to go on as they reached the shore. Gamakichi stopped abruptly as Naruto flew forwards laughing. "Ka-chan!" he shouted happily as Tsunade stood up, and caught the flying little boy in her arms, and twirled him around, making her kimono a bit wet as he giggled along with Tsunade. "I won, see, I told you, Pervy Sage," he said, laughing as Tsunade held him in her arms. Jiraiya glared at the little blonde. "Hey, you cheated, I don't have Tsunade to catch me if I stop that abruptly. The last time I got too close to her, she punched me in the face," he shouted as Naruto laughed, and gave him a victory sign. "That's too bad, Pervy Sage, because I have an awesome Ka-chan, and Shinobi always use everything they can, and Ka-chan is my secret weapon," he said proudly, and Tsunade giggled at the enthusiastic blonde in her arms and kissed his cheek. "Well, you always have to do something so reckless, don't you, Naru-chan?" she asked, and he grinned foxily, making Tsunade's mock anger melt away. "I knew you'd catch me, Ka-chan, that's why Pervy Sage will never beat me," he said, and she smiled as she put him down, and he high-fived Gamakichi as both laughed at Jiraiya, who was grumbling about oversmart blondes that were too smart for their own good. "Yo, Naruto, where's my candy? We won after all. Now time to pay up," he said, and Naruto smiled, pulling out some snacks from his pocket, and handed them to the happy toad who saluted him and puffed out in smoke. Suddenly Tsunade wrapped his head up in a towel and ruffled his head to dry him off. Alright, let's go inside and get you changed. It's time to study a bit. You had your fun with Jiraiya now. Come on, let's go, she said, picking him up, and he snuggled in her arms as Jiraiya and Shizen followed the two blondes back into the house. Naruto changed off his clothes and came into the traditional room that they used for his calligraphy practice. Tsunade put him on her lap, and he picked up the brush and started drawing the kanji. Jiraiya sat there, amazed at the skill the blonde showed with the elegance he had in his strokes. Granted, they weren't perfect, but the skill was noticeable, and that too from such a small child was astonishing. Jiraiya sat there for an hour, occasionally eating the snacks that Shizen brought him, and watched the little blonde go at calligraphy. As the hour finished, Tsunade let the boy run off to get something to eat as she poured herself some tea and turned to Jiraiya. Wow, Haim, his skill in calligraphy is amazing for his age. How long have you been teaching him? He asked, and Tsunade smiled proudly for her son. Well, he has been at it for 2 years. I started teaching him how to write and coupled it with the calligraphy arts. He is better at writing with a brush than he is with a pen, she said with a giggle, and Jiraiya saw the ingenious way of starting a child at the art of calligraphy and smiled. Wow, that's ingenious, Haim. That saved you so much time if he decides to learn Fuinjutsu, he said, and she nodded with a smile. So when are you going to start training him? Kushina started training her daughter a couple of months ago, and most of the clan children start at this age too, he said, and she smiled and nodded. Yes, tomorrow after his birthday is celebrated, I'll tell him about the start of his training. He has been pestering me for the past month, and I have been telling him to wait. I wanted to keep it as a surprise for his birthday, she said, and Jiraiya nodded, smiling. He wanted to see who his godson was more like. From what he had observed with the Uzumaki twins, they were entirely like Kushina, headstrong, and learning more by doing it. But it was their tempers that were the cause of their break in the flow of training. She had been training them from the past couple of months. When he had visited her a couple of weeks ago, they were still having trouble unlocking their chakras due to their hyperactive natures and lack of patience at the amount of concentration it took. He had helped her for a couple of days and had finally gotten them to unlock their chakra. Kushina hadn't started them with the basics of calligraphy yet, and was beginning with taijutsu's basics first. So what styles of taijutsu are you going to teach him? He asked, and she thought about it for a moment, and then answered. Well, Minato left him his own personal style, and the senju style of taijutsu that I use will be really effective if he has enough strength. Since his body is so fragile for now, and he is pretty quick and agile, I'll start him on Minato's style first, then when he is ready, I'll start him in my clan style, she said, and he nodded. Both were quite fearsome styles, and he had seen both of them in action firsthand. While the senju style of taijutsu was all about strength and was a lot more defensive with a few mighty blows to completely decapitate the opponent, Minato's own form, the hummingbird style of taijutsu, was all about speed, agility, and precision. It was fearsome since it depended on the body's speed, and agility, and quick, and precise blows, and was downright offensive as opposed to the senju style. If the boy learned both of them, then he would be almost unbeatable at hand-to-hand combat. But to learn both, his body had to be trained to the ground, and it still would take him a lot of time. But if Tsunade was sure, then he would trust her. Well, that is a wise choice, Tsunade. Both are fearsome styles in their own regards, but the body conditioning needed to be that quick for the hummingbird, and that strong for the senju style would be too hard. Are you sure he'll be able to do it? He asked, and she just smiled and waved her hand, dismissing his doubts. I've thought about that already, don't you worry, she said, and he was confused with her answer but nonetheless nodded. So does he have any particular preferences of fields that he wants to pursue? He asked, and she smiled, sipping her tea, and nodded. Well, he is interested in medical ninjutsu a lot, and I guess he might pursue sealing too. He is always asking me to teach him the awesome cool glowy hand thingy that heals people after all, she said with a giggle, and Jiraiya laughed wholeheartedly. Well, he adores you too much. It is no surprise he would want to take after your field of specialization, he said, and she nodded, smiling fondly, thinking of her son as Jiraiya put a scroll in front of her, and she took it and looked at him questionably. That's from Kushina. She has invited you to the birthday party tomorrow at the Uzumaki clan compounds. Almost all the clan heads and their families are going, and she told me to give you this too, he said, and she nodded, and put it aside, and sipped her tea, closing her eyes. So will you go? He asked, a bit hopeful, seeing her neutral response, and she put her cup down as she gazed into his eyes. No, she said simply, and he sighed. He should have known, and he didn't even bother to try her to go, knowing she would just throw him out and ban him from coming in. So have you told him something about Minato yet? He asked, and she shook her head in the negative, and he frowned. Tsunade, you should be telling him about his father, you know, he said, and she gave him an icy glare, making him gulp. Don't tell me what to do and what not to do to my Naruto. I'll tell him when he's ready or if he asks first. I am not hiding anything from him, I am just waiting for the right time, she said coldly, and he nodded, seeing her tone of finality that left no room for arguments. Next morning, Tsunade woke up as she saw her little birthday boy cuddled up against her, and smiled. She softly pulled his shirt up and ran her fingers on his stomach, smiling mischievously. Ha ha ha, Ka-chan, stop, it tickles, he said through tears as he laughed, and Tsunade giggled as she let him go, and hugged him warmly. Happy birthday, Naruto-chan, she whispered softly, and he buried his face in the crook of her neck and kissed her softly, making her smile. Arigato, Ka-chan, I love you, he said softly, and she smiled as she ran her fingers through his hair. I love you too, Naruto-chan. Now my little boy is growing up too fast, 5 already, she teased, and he buried himself in her embrace from the embarrassment, and she giggled. Alright, now up you go, it's time to have some breakfast, she said, and he smiled and nodded as she picked him up and walked into the kitchen as she saw a smiling Shizen coming in. Happy birthday, Naruto-chan, she said, taking him in her arms and kissed his cheek as he beamed happily. Arigato, Ne-chan, he said, hugging her warmly, and she took him to the kitchen and sat him on his chair as both Shizen and Tsunade went to work on the special breakfast for him. She started on the rice and put on the soup as she fried some pork cutlets, and poured the soup in a bowl over the rice, and served the steaming hot freshly fried pork cutlets on top, and added a bit of mayonnaise on top. She would never understand his peculiar combination-making skills, but she had to admit it tasted pretty damn good. She brought the tray with the 3 large bowls and put them on the table as Naruto beamed and hugged her, making her giggle at how much he loved his food. They all broke their chopsticks, and after a chorus of itadakimasu, they dug in and ate silently. She saw as he quickly tore through the food and giggled as she suddenly grabbed his bowl, and pulled him onto her lap, and grabbed his hands, putting her chin on his head. Naruto-chan, eat slowly like I told you, alright, she said softly, and he nodded as he started eating elegantly, and she smiled as he put a bite for her, and then took his own. Shizen, too, did the same with him, and Tsunade did the same for Shizen as they all laughed happily. They finished their food, and Tsunade picked Naruto up and went towards the riverside porch as she sat down with him on her lap, and her front pressed against his back as both put their feet slightly in the water. Naruto hummed a tune happily, making her smile. Naruto-chan, do you want to do something special today? She asked, and he shook his head with a smile, and spoke. No, Ka-chan, I just want to spend the day with you and Ne-chan, he said happily, and she smiled and nodded. He kept humming, and both watched as the fish came towards their feet and tickled their feet, making them giggle. After some time, Naruto suddenly stopped humming and started fiddling around, making Tsunade confused as she brought him in closer to her. What's the matter, Naruto-chan? She asked, and he sat silent for a moment before he turned around in her lap and faced her. Ka-chan, can I ask you something? He asked, and she nodded with a smile. Of course, my little angel, you can ask me anything, she said softly, and he smiled, and nodded, and fiddled a bit and spoke up. Can you tell me about Tsunade? He asked timidly, and she was shocked at first but then smiled and nodded. She was going to tell him tonight anyway, so this was all the better. She pulled out a storage scroll from the sleeve of her kimono. She unsealed the album that Jiraiya had brought her, silently thanking the pervert as she turned him around with his back pressed against her front and brought her arms around him, opening it to the first page as she saw him in his Hokage robes. Naruto gazed very curiously as she saw a few drops fall on her hands, and saw his body shaking a bit as he ran his fingers on the picture. This was Tsunade? He looks just like me, he whispered in sobs, and she smiled and nodded as she held him firmly as her little boy cried, and she cooed him and calmed him down. Ka-chan, can you tell me something about him? He asked softly, and she nodded as she put her chin on his head, and flipped a page to his academy picture. Your Tsunade was a very smart and intelligent man just like you, Naruto-chan. He always excelled at everything, and was called a genius in the village, and at his time in the academy. He was really kind and caring too, but he held an air of authority that made everyone follow him wherever he said. He was born with those eyes of a leader, just like your eyes, that showed off everything he felt. He was born in a time of war and didn't have any parents, but he didn't let that stop him. He created his own jutsu and was a once-in-a-generation genius at the art. He fought bravely in the war, and his greatest battle was at the Canopy Bridge. His team was almost gone, and all of them were injured. If the bridge was lost, then the village would have lost the war. So instead of retreating with the squad and running back to the village, your Tsunade stood up against 1,000 ninjas alone, used his signature jutsu, and beat them all. He won the war all on his own, and people were so scared of his power that they were said to run away if they even saw him anywhere. He was called the Yellow Flash because he was so fast, and so good with his signature jutsu that all people saw was a flash, and it was all over, she said as she flipped through the album during his younger days as a ninja, and his days in the war. She was glad that it was only his ninja photo album, and none of them had Kushina in it, so she didn't have to answer any of those questions yet. Naruto sat transfixed, hearing her every word, and burning it all up in his memory as he gazed at the album star-struck. Then what happened, Ka-chan? He asked, and she smiled as she sipped some water from the bottle, and continued her story. Well, when he came back from the war, he was considered a hero in the village, and after a few years, his name was so feared and respected in the world that the village named him Hokage. The youngest ever at 24 years old. She said as he asked the question. Ka-chan, what is a Hokage? He asked curiously, and she smiled sadly as this was the question she had once heard Nawaki ask her granduncle, and remembered his speech that he spoke almost for word. The Hokage is the leader of the village hidden in the leaves. He is the strongest ninja of the village and is the one who looks after everyone. The village is a tree, and the people are its leaves where the Hokage is the stem that holds it firmly when the winds blow harsh. He is the shadow that looks upon the village and keeps it safe, which is why he is called the Fire Shadow. She said, and he nodded as she continued, and her mind went down to memory lane as she remembered her granduncle standing on the Hokage monument with her in his arms with her grandfather beside him as she quoted his words. Where the tree leaves dance one shall find flames, the fire's shadow will illuminate the village, and once again, tree leaves shall bud anew. It doesn't matter what you do if you live and die as you like. However, no matter what road you end up taking, remember to protect the people that are precious to you. That is what it means to be Hokage. She quoted, and Naruto turned around in her arms with a determined look in his eyes that made her capture his gaze. Then I'll become Hokage too, just like Tsunade, and one day I'll surpass them all, even Tsunade. To be Hokage, that's my dream. He said in a determined voice with brilliantly determined shining eyes that took her breath away as she saw an image of her brother, Dan, and finally, Hashirama, and Tobirama with smiles, and their hands on his shoulders, and Minato's hand on his head standing behind him with smiles, and her eyes watered at his words. Her eyes streamed with tears as she brought him in a tight embrace, not wanting to let go. Naruto hugged her tightly and was worried if he had said something wrong. Oh my god, he too has that accursed dream. I can't lose him, not him too. He is the only one left for me. He is my lifeline, what should I do? She thought as she felt a hand on her shoulder, and saw Hiruzen standing there with a grandfatherly smile on his face, and gave her a nod of confidence, and she wiped her tears away and smiled as she gazed at the worried eyes of her son. Hiruzen had heard everything she said, and couldn't be prouder of her words. She was nurturing him well, and he, too, had inherited the will of fire of his ancestors. This was the perfect advice on a birthday he mused and was proud to have raised such a brilliant student. Just one more time, I'll believe in him and help him forge his path to wherever he wants to. I promised myself I'd help him in whatever he wanted to do, and if he wants to follow this dream, then I'll help him achieve it. This time I'll watch him go through it. She thought as she removed the necklace from her neck, and put over his as Naruto looked at it curiously, and wondered why she had given her pretty necklace to him. She saw his curious eyes and smiled. That Naruto is my grandfather and the first Hokage's necklace. Only those that will actually become Hokage wear it. It is a Senju family heirloom, and my most precious possession besides you. This is a promise that I'll help you achieve whatever you want to. She said, and kissed his forehead and gave him a warm smile and hugged him tightly. She broke off the hug, and Naruto gazed at the old man behind her curiously and tilted his head to the side in confusion. He was in his usual robes without the Hokage attire. Who are you? He asked, and he smiled at him warmly. I'm Hiruzen Sarutobi Naruto-kun. I am the Sandaime Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village and your mother's sensei. He said as Naruto's eyes widened, and he looked at him startled. You're the Hokage? He asked and got a nod in return. And you taught Ka-chan too? He asked, getting another nod and a smile. Wow, you must be strong. He said, and Hiruzen smiled proudly and nodded again. Tsunade watched the back and forth conversation with amusement. But Ka-chan is stronger, and besides, you're pretty old. He said, and Hiruzen's face faltered, and Tsunade laughed as she coddled up her son. Oh Naruto-chan, you're too cute hee hee, she said, laughing as Hiruzen fixed his clothes, and looked embarrassed. Just you wait, old man, I'll take that position of Hokage from you and kick you out of your office. Just you see. He said, making Tsunade, and Hiruzen laughed, and Naruto pouted and puffed his cheeks, making him look adorable as Tsunade brought him into an embrace. He snuggled in her arms, making Hiruzen smile warmly. I have no doubt, my boy. He said, and Naruto smiled at the old man and thought he was a good man even if he was pretty old now. Alright, Naruto-chan, now run off to your Nei-chan, and let your Ka-chan catch up with her sensei, alright? She said softly, and he shook his head and crossed his arms, making her smile. She kissed his cheek, and he let his arms drop but still shook his head. She kissed him on the other cheek, and he pouted. You're mean, Ka-chan, you always do that. He said, and she giggled as he ran off into the house, and Hiruzen took a seat beside her and dipped his feet in the slowly flowing water of the stream. It's a surprise to see you here, sensei, shouldn't you be in the village? She asked, and he smiled. No, Jiraiya took care of the work for me today, to let me come and visit you. After all, I do have to spoil my grandson. I had to bribe him with my crystal ball, letting him peek for 10 minutes. He said, and she smiled as both sat in comfortable silence. I'm surprised you let him pursue that dream. I thought you hated the position of Hokage. He said, and she nodded. I still do. She said, and he looked at her with a raised eyebrow. But if he wants to pursue that dream, then I'll help him get there. I promised myself I'll let him do whatever he wanted, and this is the first time he has ever set a goal for himself, and I didn't have the heart to refuse him after seeing his eyes. He is the only one that I can't refuse anything to. I'll believe in him and give him whatever he wants," she said, and he smiled and nodded as he gazed at the river. "I'm proud of you, Tsunade. Of all the 3 of my students, you are the one that has made me the proudest," he said, and she looked at him, surprised, and he put a hand on her head and smiled. She felt pride in her heart as she felt like she was back in her genin days when she wanted to hear those words from his mouth. "The will of fire burns brightly in that boy, and I know you will nurture him to become a fine man," he said, and she nodded. "You must be happy, Ha-sensei. To become Hokage, he will have to become a shinobi under your command," she said, and he nodded. "Of course I am happy. I have great hopes for him, and I see that Jiraiya was right. He loves you dearly," he said, and she smiled and nodded. "So not going to ask me to return to the village, sensei?" she asked, and he shook his head, making her confused. "No, Tsunade, the council wants to get their hands on Naruto, especially those elders with Danzo being the primary threat. They have amassed quite a lot of power over the years, so Jiraiya and I are working to re-establish the old ways. Naruto should stay here with you then return to the village. I am no fool, Tsunade. I know that Naruto isn't ready to learn of his burden or abandonment yet, and Kushina's selfishness to get back into his life will only harm him now. Let him mature and nurture him to be the best that he could. IWA is already hostile enough with us as it is, and after the Kumohyuga incident, the village is in turmoil. Naruto is much safer here. Our enemies won't attempt to kidnap the Uzumaki twins since they are Jinchuriki and practically heroes of the village, and it will lead to an instant declaration to war, but Naruto is another case altogether. They will try to abduct him, and force him to be brainwashed, and become loyal to the village or eliminate him altogether. Our spies have noted that they are looking for Naruto ever since they learned of your adoption, and that he is outside the protection of the village. He is much safer here. Let the village get back up to strength, and let me resolve these internal issues. Then, you can return, and Naruto can lead a peaceful life and be strong enough to protect himself," he said, and she nodded, trusting the professor completely. She knew he always wanted the best for her, and Naruto along with the village, and agreed with him on every point. "Thank you, sensei," she said, and he nodded as they stood up and walked back to the house. They walked up to Naruto, and Shizen and Hiruzen smiled as he took out a packed gift and handed it to the blonde, who took it with a polite bow. Hiruzen was surprised at the politeness and sudden elegance that the boy held, and smiled. He saw him waiting for his permission, and he smiled and nodded as he opened it slowly, took out a packed set of custom-made shurikens, smiled happily, and thanked him. Hiruzen just ruffled the boy's hair and smiled. "All right, now I have to get back to the village. I can't be gone too long, or Jiraiya might make peeking legal in the village," he said, making them all besides Naruto chuckle, which was confused. "Arigato, Gigi." He thanked him again with a bow, and Hiruzen smiled and nodded as he went out of the compounds, and towards the village. They celebrated his birthday like every year, and Tsunade gave him some scrolls on the basic fundamentals of shinobi, and promised to start his training from the next day as his present. They all celebrated until Naruto fell asleep from exhaustion. Meanwhile, in Kanehigakure no Sato, Uzumaki clan compounds, Kushina was at the party as she half-heartedly entertained the guests, and kept glancing at the entrance if maybe Tsunade would come, though she knew the chances were really slim, if at all none. She watched as Jiraiya and Kakashi were there with the twins happily, and Jiraiya had told her that he had given the invitation, but she had refused it completely. It made her quite furious that she couldn't even meet her own son, but knew that it was her own fault. She saw Hiruzen come in, and a smile graced her lips as she greeted the man. Both of them walked towards the twins, and Hiruzen smiled a grandfatherly smile at the two of them. "Happy birthday, Kara and Mito," he said warmly, and both of them grinned as he handed them the same presents as Naruto, and they immediately took them and opened them. Both of them frowned a bit at seeing a shuriken set as they expected something cool from the Hokage, and thanked him nonetheless, and ran off to the other kids. He unconsciously noticed the difference between the sisters and their brother at how they handled each other, and saw that they were completely different from him. "Thank you, Hiruzen, for coming to the party," she said, and he nodded with a smile. "It was no problem at all, Kushina, and most of the council members too invited me at the get-together here, and I wouldn't miss the chance of meeting my granddaughters now, would I? After all, I went to see Naruto too," he said, and Kushina looked at him with curious eyes. "Really? How is he? Is he happy?" she asked, and he nodded with a smile. "He's fine, Kushina, and he is very happy. Tsunade loves him deeply, and the same goes for young Naruto. Tsunade today told him about his father when he asked her, and he decided on a new dream," he said, and she looked at him with curious eyes, making him smile. "Really? What is his dream?" she asked, and he smiled fondly, remembering the moment he saw earlier. After Tsunade told him about his father, he was so starstruck with the stories that he set a new goal for himself. "Apparently, he wishes to surpass all the Hokages, even his father, and wants to become Hokage," he said, and her heart ached. Her little boy shared her dream that she held in her heart, and felt a pang of jealousy at hearing how happy he was with Tsunade. Hiruzen saw the flicker of emotions through her face and smiled sadly. So then will she be coming back to the village for Naruto to join the academy then? She asked, and he sighed and shook his head, making her more confused. No, she will most probably return by the time of their graduation time, and I'll let him take the graduation exam then, seeing as he would be trained by her personally all these years. He said, and her eyes widened. She wasn't going to bring him to her all those years. She immediately turned furious as she glared at the man. How could she keep him away from me all these years? And why are you showing her favoritism by letting Naruto take the exams when she pleases? She asked, and he matched her glare with his own, making her flinch. Kushina, I am not showing any favoritism. You can hold your daughters out too and can have them take the exams directly at any time they please. This has been a rule ever since the reign of the Nidaime, that students who have acquired the necessary skills can take the exams at any time they please so as to not hold back their developments. Kakashi and Itachi are two prime examples who graduated early with their skill. Please, Kushina, don't take out your anger and frustrations on everyone and wait for the time to come. You do regret your mistakes, and that is what matters. He said calmly, and she nodded, smiling sadly, knowing he was right, and she had to just wait for the right time to come. I know, Hiruzen, it's just I want to hold my baby boy in my arms. I haven't even seen him in the past 5 years, and have no idea how he is or if he is even happy. I just have your, and Jiraiya's, and to some extent, Kakashi's word on the matter, and I feel like I am missing him too much. She said, clenching her fists and biting her trembling lip as he put a hand on her shoulder and smiled. I understand, Kushina, and I'll get Jiraiya to get you some pictures of the boy, and then you could see how happy he is. Tsunade even has some videos from his birthdays from the security cameras of her house that I could arrange for you. I'm sure Tsunade won't mind. And I assure you, Kushina, he is one of the happiest kids I have seen, and Tsunade cares for and loves him deeply. He said calmly, and she smiled a little and nodded as they went through the party, and the night ended in both the compounds on a happy note for the time being. Hidden Senju Compounds, age 5. It was early morning, and Tsunade was sleeping peacefully as she felt a light tap on her shoulder. She opened her eyes and saw her little sunshine wide awake and gazing at her curiously. He instantly buried his face in her neck and hugged her till she rose giggling profusely. So Naruto is excited about his training now, isn't he? She asked softly, and he nodded in her neck, making her smile. She sat up and put him on her lap as she brushed his hair softly, and he played with her blonde locks. So Kaa-chan, what will you teach me today? He asked, and she smiled as she kept brushing his hair softly. Well, we are going to try and unlock your chakra, Naruto, she said, and he nodded, beaming happily. That's the thing that you used to do awesome jutsu with, isn't it, Kaa-chan? He asked, and she giggled and nodded at the cheerful boy. Hi, but today I'll tell you what chakra is and how to unlock and use it a bit, she said, and he nodded as she picked him up and went towards the kitchen, and all of them had breakfast, and Tsunade took him to the clan grounds under a tree and made him sit down cross-legged and sat beside him. Shizen sat a bit far away watching Naruto take his first steps into the skill set of the shinobi arts. Alright, Naruto, now I'll explain to you the detailed theory of chakra. Listen to everything carefully and ask me to explain whatever you don't understand. Alright, she stated. He nodded, giving her his full attention. My grandfather and granduncle personally explained and taught me what chakra is, using both of their views of the concept in tandem to merge the spiritual aspects with the practical aspect of it. To summarize it, chakra is the energy used by shinobi to enhance their skills. It consists of 2 halves, she said, opening 2 fingers, and he nodded. The first is the spiritual energy that consists of Aryan chakra, which means the power of the mind and of one's essence. It is developed through amassing knowledge over the years and can be increased through studying, concentrating, and meditating over the years and builds up with experience. She said and paused to see if he understood everything and got a nod in return and continued closing her second finger. The second is physical energy, or the yang chakra, which means the power of one's body and of the physical essence. It is developed through intense training of the body and can be increased with the increase in one's stamina and other physical traits. She said, letting him take it all in, and waited for a question but got just a nod, making her smile. When these 2 energies are molded together, the chakra is formed, and to strengthen it, one must train both their body and minds. Chakra is present in everybody but is active in those who make the connection between mind and body. Both Hashirama and Tobirama, to a lesser extent, felt that chakra is more than an individual's energy, but rather an energy that connects and unites us all, and that people began to seal the energy off to themselves by separating the energies of mind and body. She said, and he nodded, taking everything in. She told him to reiterate everything, and he worded everything words for word, surprising her, and then she got to the part of unlocking his chakra. Alright, now we will try and unlock your chakra, Naruto, she said, and he grinned foxily in excitement, making her smile. Alright, now relax your body and close your eyes. Keep your focus on yourself and nothing else and try and find a warm pull near your stomach. Remember, everyone's chakra system is different, but the one thing they all have in common is the location of their pool of chakra. she explained, and he nodded, doing as she said, and sat like that for half an hour meditating but didn't find it. Opening his eyes, he sighed in defeat, as he had hoped to unlock it on his first try to impress his mother. It's alright, Naruto, rarely anyone gets their chakra unlocked on their first try. Try to visualize the energy as a stream or body of water you can touch, alright, she said, and he nodded, and she sat back as Shizen sat beside her. She knew it would take him some time, maybe a week or so before he unlocked it. So Tsunade-sama, how is he doing? Asked Shizen, and she smiled. He is doing great. He understood the more complex theory of chakra word for word after I explained it only once. He'll unlock it soon enough, the boy's smart just like his mother, she said proudly, and Shizen smiled and nodded as they sat for an hour and were surprised to see a little boy stay so focused for such a long time. Naruto's breathing became light as his mind went blank, and he started to eliminate all distractions around him, leaving him in a void with nothing but himself. Next, he took his mother's advice and began attempting to visualize water sources, first a drop of water, then a glass worth, then a bucket. However, this wasn't enough if he had to imagine a single amount of chakra for him to use. He'd never be able to do anything fast enough. He thought for a bit, well, maybe if I had enough water I wouldn't need to make more, how about an ocean? He thought as all around him, he began to feel a surge of energy, and rush of the ocean hit him. Too much, he thought as he quickly stopped thinking in terms of the sea. I need to control the water. I can't keep going back to the source to ask for it, and I can't bring the source with me, then what should I do? He contemplated this for what seemed like an hour, then it hit him, not unlike the ocean a while ago. How did we solve this problem in the real world? Plumbing. If I can find a tap or faucet, I can control the amount of chakra I pull and still have the control to limit myself. He concluded and imagined a large basin, like the one his mom uses in poison and medicine mixing, and above it a large pipe that seemed to narrow down to a reasonable size, and a lever to release the flow. Using his base intuition, he pulled the lever and saw a smooth stream appear and fill the basin slowly, while the basin seemed to contain a natural drain that leads to smaller pipes. As the basin began to level out, the void started to fade, and Naruto found himself in a room he had visited before in a dream. At the same time, Tsunade and Shizen were smiling and making small talk while sensing short chakra bursts too minuscule to be sustainable. Each burst growing in size, showing the blonde's progress in unlocking his chakra, as suddenly a burst of visibly purple chakra came rolling off of Naruto's body, making their hair stand on their necks. The ground around Naruto cracked, and the chakra swirled wildly around him as both women's eyes widened at the density and amount of chakra the boy held and how it flowed just wild and completely untamed. Naruto kept it up for a second at most. It was only after the chakra dissipated did he open his eyes. Having felt so powerful during the last few moments, he knew he had done it. He could feel the presence of his mother and sister and pinpoint where they were exactly. He had guessed it came with the usage of chakra and thought it was cool. He grinned at the stunned expressions of his mother and sister, and tried to stand up and walk to his mother. He stood up with shaky legs and took a couple of steps as his legs wobbled and his vision blurred a bit as he started falling face first, only for Tsunade to catch him in her arms before he could impact, and picked him up as he wrapped his arms around her neck and chuckled tiredly. I did it, Kaa-chan, he whispered in a tired voice, and she smiled and brushed his hair softly. Yes, you did, my little angel, I'm proud of you, she whispered, rubbing his back gently as he rested in her arms. I feel so sleepy, Kaa-chan, he said softly, and she hugged him closer and kissed his head softly. You did great, Naruto-chan, I'm so proud of you. Now sleep, even you must be tired with all the chakra you pushed out. You'll be better after a nap and some food, alright, she said softly, and he nodded and closed his eyes as his breathing became soft, and he gave into exhaustion. Tsunade rubbed his back gently, and his sleep deepened as he breathed on her neck softly, making her sure he was in a deep sleep. She went to the living room and laid him down on the couch with his head on her lap, and Shizen put a blanket over him. She kept running her fingers through his hair, and he snuggled into her stomach, making her giggle as she rubbed his whiskers, making him purr and smile. She was broken out of her musings as Shizen spoke up. He unlocked it on his first day, Tsunade-sama, she said in a calm voice, and Tsunade smiled and nodded, smiling at the sleeping face of her son. Yes, he did. He is showing signs of his skill already. It took me a week before I unlocked it, she said, and Shizen nodded. It took her 10 days herself, but to do it on his first was something else. And you felt the density of his chakra, right? I haven't felt such a potent chakra ever before. He cracked the ground, and the color of his chakra was purple instead of the usual light blue that can be seen when a lot of chakra is openly condensed, like when you supercharge your fists, she said, and Tsunade nodded, remembering the power that he unleashed, almost taking her breath away. I haven't felt such a potent chakra in years, she said as her mind went back some years, and Shizen looked at her curiously, waiting for her to explain further. The last time I felt such a potent chakra was when I used to train with my grandfather and granduncle. They both had the most potent chakra I've ever felt, but today, Naruto-chan's was almost as dense as my grandfather's, and he hasn't even had any training to control it yet. she said fondly, and Shizen's eyes widened as she understood what she meant. You don't mean, she said in disbelief, and Tsunade nodded. He has strong senju genes in him. My clan was known for its potent chakra that gave us one skill that was far stronger than all of the other skills we trained in, and when mastered the proficient skill became unstoppable when coupled with the various other skills we trained in, which was why we are known as the clan of 1,000 skills. I don't know what he has awakened in him, but he will be something else. My chakra was potent enough in the use of medical chakra that gave me advanced healing skills. Maybe I can pass on all of my knowledge to him. He really is my son, she said fondly, and Shizen sat there stunned. But how is that possible? Tsunade-sama, he is an Uzumaki, she said, and Tsunade cut her off. Yes, and Uzumakis are a cousin clan of Senju that had their skills occur mainly in Fuinjutsu and Kenjutsu. This separation led to some of them using their dense chakra to form constructs made of chakra that was based in sealing. Maybe Naruto's activated the dormant potency with my feeding him all these years. That's the only possible explanation, she said, and Shizen nodded, not finding words, and the points she made were the only possible explanation in her opinion. So, what do you think he will awaken then? Asked Shizen, and Tsunade smiled as she cradled her son in her lap. I don't know, but whatever he will, it will be strong seeing the density of chakra he has, she said, and Shizen nodded, smiling as she saw the love in Tsunade's eyes as she cradled Naruto and left to prepare some lunch. Naruto woke up 3 hours later and snuggled into the stomach of Tsunade and gave a slight yawn, making her giggle. He gazed up as Tsunade placed a kiss on his forehead, making him smile as he rubbed his eyes and still felt tired. Ka-chan, why do I feel so tired? He asked, and she smiled at his innocent question. Well, Naruto-chan, that was the first time you unleashed your chakra, and being the reckless little angel you are, you went overboard and pushed out a lot of it, she said softly, and he grinned foxily, making her smile at the boy. So how did it feel to use your chakra for the first time? She asked, and he smiled as he laid on her lap, and she brushed her fingers through his hair. At first it was difficult. I was in a void, and began to imagine my chakra as you told me to, and I thought, well, if a bucket isn't a big enough source of water, I should go for broke and thought of an ocean. That was a mistake as it hit me all at once. I had no way to control it, so I scrapped it and thought of it in terms of the real world. How did we solve this water problem? And I came up with pipes like we have in the house and a faucet for me to control the flow of the chakra into a basin for me to use as I need to. And when I opened my eyes, I felt amazing, Ka-chan. I felt so powerful, like I could do anything. I could even sense where you and Nei-chan were, even with my eyes closed tightly, he said, and Tsunade's eyes widened. What did you say, Naruto-chan? You could sense where Shizen and I were? Can you tell me what you felt? She asked curiously, and he thought for a moment and nodded. Hi, I could sense where you and Nei-chan were, and when I opened my eyes you were there. It was almost like some small beacons with different lights. Yours was brighter and bigger than Nei-chan's, and both had different colors, but I could only sense it when I had my chakra fully open. I can't right now, he said, and Tsunade smiled ear to ear and hugged him tightly. Oh, my little Naruto-chan is a sensor, she squealed, hugging him tightly, and he snuggled into her embrace and kissed her neck softly. Ka-chan, what's a sensor? He asked innocently after a moment, and she smiled. A sensor is an ability that few people possess by birth. It is a handy ability since a sensor could sense the presence of other shinobi even if they are hiding. Experienced and high-level ninja create their own sensory techniques through various means, but they still aren't anywhere near as powerful as a natural sensory ability, she explained, and he nodded. Wow, is it really that great? He asked, and she nodded with a smile. Sensors are rare and very useful in the shinobi world and are really difficult to get an unexpected ambush since the sensor will already sense their presence when they are only trying to get close. It is a rare and powerful ability, and we'll develop it and train you in it properly, alright? She asked, and he nodded happily with a smile at having such a cool ability. She picked up the miso soup and rice on the tray that was beside her and put it on her side as Naruto tried holding the chopsticks. But his hands were shaking heavily, and he dropped them. Tsunade smiled and grabbed his hands and stopped him from trying it as he looked at her, confused. I'll feed you, Naruto-chan. Your body is still adjusting to the newly unlocked chakra. So you try and do as little as possible until tomorrow, alright? She asked, and he nodded as she fed her little boy, and as he finished, he yawned cutely. Tsunade picked him up and walked into her room as she tucked him in and kissed his forehead, and moved out as she started studying the scroll for Minato's taijutsu style. She had been studying it for a year now to help Naruto learn that style. She had to admit it was a fearsome style when mastered. She had studied it in detail to help him work out whatever she could help him in, and knew that she had to lay a good foundation for her boy to build on. Shizen saw her studying and smiled as she saw the determination on her face to teach Naruto. Ever since Naruto had come into her life, she hadn't even thought about gambling and drinking, and it made her feel pride for her master. So Tsunade-sama, what are you going to teach him tomorrow? She asked, and Tsunade smiled as she put the scroll down. Well, I'll be starting him up in Minato's taijutsu style and let him get used to it. Then I guess some simple chakra control exercises and his usual calligraphy lessons. along with the start of the basics of Jutsu, should suffice for now. This won't put too much pressure on him, and will help him grow as well. So I guess from morning till noon we'll go through taijutsu, then a couple of hours for chakra control and the basics of chakra theory, and after lunch a couple of hours for Jutsu. That was the basic schedule I have in my mind, and then from evening till dinner time, he could play and relax a little, she said, and Shizen nodded. That was a pretty nice schedule in her opinion, and would help him grow immensely with one-on-one training with a Sannin, she mused. They sat making small talk before Tsunade decided to call it a night, and went to bed with her little blonde sunshine as he cuddled up against his mother. Next morning, Tsunade woke up to the rays of the sunshine falling on her face as she gazed at the little boy cuddled up beside her and smiled. She brought him close to her, and he snuggled up against her as she laid a kiss on his head, and he snuggled in further, making her giggle. She started laying kisses all over him, and he giggled and tried to get her off. "Kaa-chan, stop it, you're tickling me," he said in between chuckles, and she smiled as he yawned and hugged her close and closed his eyes. "Come on, time to get up, Naruto-chan," she said softly, brushing his hair, and he whined and kept a hold on her. 5 more minutes," he said with a yawn, and she giggled and held him close to her, letting him have his rest. He woke up after 10 minutes and was gazing at her with curious eyes as she smiled at the boy. "So what are we going to do today, Kaa-chan?" he asked, and she smiled, already expecting the question. "Today, we are going to start you on some new things, but I'll tell you once we start it," she said, and he pouted. He gazed at her with innocent wide eyes and looked at her pleadingly. "Please, you love me, don't you, Kaa-chan? You can tell me," he said, rubbing her cheek softly, making her resolve melt away, and she smiled and shook her head. "You are getting too smart, mister, but this time you won't be getting me with that look now. Let's go," she said, and picked him up on her shoulder with one arm as he flapped his leg and punched her back, trying to get off, and she laughed. "Let me go, Kaa-chan, I'll get back to you for this," he said, struggling half-heartedly, and she giggled. "Oh, you're 100 years too early to get me, mister," she said, giggling, and Shizen laughed as she saw the two coming into the dining room that way. All of them had breakfast and finished eating it in comfortable silence. "All right, Naruto-chan, let's go outside and get you started with the first part of your schedule, all right?" she said, and he nodded, pulling her with him happily running, making her giggle and follow the enthusiastic blonde outside. She led him to a small clearing and stood in front of him as he looked at her with those wide, curious eyes, making her smile at the little blonde. "All right, Naruto-chan, today we'll forego our jog since it's too late, and start you with the first main branch of the shinobi arts, taijutsu or hand-to-hand combat. Most people learn a single taijutsu style that contains both defensive and offensive katas, but we are going to go with a different approach in your case," she said, and he tilted his head to the side cutely. "Why is that, Kaa-chan?" he asked innocently, and she smiled. "Well, you see, Naruto-chan, the taijutsu style your Kaa-chan uses is a defensive style with minimal offensive strikes, but I have customized it to my own needs with my own techniques. So to not make you too forced on those if you don't manage to make it and learn my techniques, we will start you with your father's style, that is completely offensive, and then let you master my style and see if you can learn the technique your Kaa-chan uses to overcome its limitations," she said, and Naruto nodded happily, way too excited at the prospect of learning the two styles of his parents. "Kaa-chan, you said that you use a technique to perfect your style. What is that technique?" he asked innocently, and she smiled at his attentiveness. "That's very sharp of you, Naruto-chan, but I will show you when I deem you are ready for it, and maybe even teach it to you. You will be the first one ever to learn this technique other than me," she said, and he looked at her with glimmering eyes. "Just you wait, Kaa-chan, you'll be teaching me that special technique in no time," he said, and she giggled. "I have no doubt, Naruto-chan, about Naruto-chan," she said with a genuine smile showing the faith she had in the boy, and he grinned foxily. "All right, Naruto-chan, here is the scroll for the taijutsu style now. We will go through the first 2 katas for today. That should give you enough to cover the basics of the style for today. I'll help you fix your mistakes and make corrections to your stances, so now go on," she said, and he nodded, unrolling the scroll and tried to copy the katas in the scroll, making many mistakes that Tsunade was continually pointing out and fixing for him. At noon, Naruto was huffing and puffing from the strain the katas were putting on him as he plopped down, and his muscles ached from the newfound exhaustion that they had. He had to admit his Tsunade must have been a speed freak to go through and master the katas of such a style. Tsunade smiled as she saw the plop-down blonde bundle in front of her. She walked up and sat beside him, putting his head on her lap as she rubbed his head, and his breathing calmed down. "And here I thought you were going to master it all in one day," she said playfully, and he glared at her tiredly. "Hey, it's not my fault that Tsunade was a speed freak. Just you see, I'll master it," he said heatedly, and she giggled and kissed his forehead gently, giving him a heartwarming smile. "I have no doubt that you'll surpass me and your father one day. I believe in you completely," she said warmly, and his eyes widened as he looked at her with watering eyes. "Really?" he whispered, and she nodded with a smile as he threw himself in her arms, making her giggle and cried. There, Naruto-chan, strong boys don't cry," she whispered, rubbing his back, and he sniffed as he kissed her neck softly. "I love you, Kaa-chan," he said, making her heart warm and a broad smile spread on her face. I know, my little sunshine, and I love you the most. She said softly, and he smiled. No, I love you the moistest, he said, and she giggled. The mostest, Naru-chan? She asked in a giggle. Hi, he said, making her chuckle. Alright, then I love you the mostest too. You're too cute, my little angel, she said with a giggle as he snuggled in her arms. I'm not cute, I'm dangerous, he said, puffing his cheeks, and she laughed as she got a mischievous tint in her eyes. Dangerous, huh? She asked slyly, and he gulped as she took a position like a pouncing tiger and pounced on him. Roar, she said as she started tickling him, and he laughed, trying to get her away but to no avail. Ka-chan, stop, it tickles, alright, I'm cute. Please stop, he pleaded in giggles as she stopped and picked him up in her arms as he snuggled in her embrace. Shizen watched it all from afar and was smiling at the two playing blondes. Alright, Naru-chan, now we are going to learn how to control your chakra. You remember how you pulled it out yesterday, right? She asked, and he nodded. Hi, but it makes me feel fuzzy, he said, and she giggled, making him pout. Naru-chan, you unlocked your chakra yesterday but don't know how to control it. You pulled almost all of it out yesterday at once and released it into the air, which made you feel fuzzy. She teased, and he puffed his cheeks. Hey, that's not funny, he said, and she laughed as he huffed and sat down, turning his head the other way and crossed his arms. She got behind him and put him on her lap as she put her head on his shoulder and saw his eyes were closed, and was angry. Alright, I'm sorry, Naru-chan, you can forgive your Ka-chan, can't you? She asked gently, and he snorted and looked away. She got an idea as she sniffed and put her face in her hands, faking crying. As soon as he heard it and saw her, his face saddened, and he hugged her. I'm sorry, don't cry, he whispered, kissing her cheek as his own eyes watered, and he sniffed, and she smiled and grinned mischievously, and his eyes widened at being outdone. See, you are 100 years too early to outdo me, mister, she said, and he huffed but didn't say anything instead, blushing in embarrassment, making her giggle. Alright, so let's move on. Now to learn how to control your chakra. The first chakra control exercise and the simplest of them all is the leaf balancing exercise. Like yesterday, pull your chakra, or in your case, open the flow of chakra and try and concentrate on putting it onto the leaf you will put on your forehead and try and stick it there with chakra, she said, handing him a leaf, and he nodded, putting it on his forehead and closed his eyes in concentration. He found the basin from the previous day. He did as she told him, opening the faucet from a drip to a steady stream into the basin and tried concentrating it to his forehead as the chakra flowed to a specific pipe going up and suddenly felt his forehead get wet. He opened his eyes and saw that the leaf was dripping damp and sticking to his forehead as he gazed above to see if it was raining, but the sky was pretty clear and was confused at the damp leaf in his hands. Ka-chan, I think it's going to rain. Let's go inside and practice, he said, innocently not understanding what he had done just now, and turned to Tsunade, whose eyes were as wide as saucers and had an expression of disbelief. He grew nervous and looked around, getting uncomfortable at her stare. Ka-chan, did I do something wrong? He asked timidly. She broke out of her stupor as she saw Naruto getting nervous and fiddling with his shirt with his bottom lip trembling, thinking he had disappointed her by not meeting her expectations. I'm sorry I tried, but I think I messed it up, he said, disheartened to have messed up the most basic exercise, and stood up to get a leaf, only to be scooped up by his mother. As soon as she saw his hurt and pained expression and his cute sniffs, her heart tore away at his innocent voice and eyes as she held him close to her, softly rubbing his back. Naru-chan, you did really good. I was so surprised at how good you did that I was shocked, and I'm so proud of you, she said softly. Really, I did good. You're not upset or disappointed? He asked shyly with a sniff, and she cupped his face in her hands and kissed his tears away softly, giving him a gentle smile. My little Naru-chan can never disappoint because you never cease to amaze me, she said softly, and he smiled and snuggled in her arms, and she held her little boy in her arms happily. Yes, you did really good. Now let's go and start your calligraphy practice, alright, she said, and he tilted his head to the side cutely. But what about chakra control, Ka-chan? He asked, and she smiled, ruffling his hair, making him giggle. We'll get to that tomorrow. There is something I will have to change for it to be more effective for you, and then we'll start. So go and get started with your calligraphy arts and I'll join you in a moment, alright? She asked softly, and he smiled and nodded as he ran off. She walked into the house and took a glass of water and drank it halfway in a gulp, and sat down on the dining table, staring at the water intently. Shizen came in and saw her master sitting there, staring at the glass of water, lost in thought, and sat in front of her. Tsunade-sama, what's the matter? She asked, and Tsunade looked up surprised that she had spaced out and smiled fondly. Looks like Naru-chan really is my son, she said in a far-off voice, making Shizen confused as Tonton too looked at her bewildered and oinked in confusion. What do you mean, Tsunade-sama? Of course I know he is your son, she asked, and Tsunade shook her head with a face-splitting smile, making her all the more curious. No, I mean, he is closely related to the Senju blood somehow, and has awakened the dormant Senju special ability today that I told you about. I have figured out what he has awakened, and I couldn't be prouder," she said, and now Shizen was dying of curiosity and the suspense that had built up. "What has he awakened? What is his dormant ability? Tell me, Tsunade-sama?" she asked pleadingly, and Tsunade's smile didn't falter as she giggled at her tone, and the reaction she knew would come. "Our little bundle of sunshine is more closely related to my grand uncle than we could ever imagine. He has inherited the special skill of one of the two most powerful senjus in history," she said, and Shizen's eyes widened, and her jaw dropped to the ground. "Why you don't mean?" she stuttered, and Tsunade nodded with a grin. "Hi, he has inherited Tobirama Senju's absolute control over the water element. The same thing that my grand uncle once told me had happened in his childhood to show his strong affinity to the water element happened today," she said, and Shizen's eyes were glued to her as she watched her with an amused smirk and how she hung on to her every word. "The leaf exercise never worked for my grand uncle," she said, making her confused. "Why is that, Tsunade-sama?" she asked, and Tsunade smiled as she remembered her grand uncle and the time she had spent with him. "Because Shizen, his affinity to water was so high that as soon as he concentrated his potent chakra to the leaf, instead of floating on his forehead, it would become dripping wet. And the exact same thing happened today with Naruto," she said, and her eyes widened as she came to the realization. "That's great, Tsunade-sama. He'll be mighty one day," she said happily, and Tsunade nodded but had a worried face, making her confused as suddenly she stared at Shizen intently, making her nervous. "Shizen, we will keep this to ourselves, don't even tell Jiraiya about this for the time being. I don't want him treating Naruto differently or forcing him to master his ability and pressuring him too much. The fewer people know, the better it is, as it would create a huge target on him, since many have tried to gain such mastery over their element, but have failed since it can only be inherited genetically. My feeding my little boy and his distant relation to the Senju clan has made it good and given him an ace in the hole against any dangers," she said, and Shizen nodded, agreeing entirely with her. "So how will this change his training, Tsunade-sama?" she asked, and Tsunade thought for a few moments and answered, "Well, not much for now, but we'll have to change the leaf exercise somehow to suit him better, and I'll start going through my grand uncle's scrolls that he left in the Senju archives for anyone in our clan who may have inherited this ability in the future. We will have to get his control up to par. He will have an easier time at elemental manipulation of water than anyone else. However, he still will need the control over his chakra to use it effectively, plus his affinity will aid him better in medical ninjutsu, and I'll get his chakra control on par with me one day," she said, determined, and Shizen nodded happily, offering her help in any way she could. She really wanted to pass on her skills to her son. Shizen mused happily and wished that her little brother would learn all her skills and carry on her legacy with her. Hidden Senju compounds. Naruto age 5. A few months later in spring, Shizen went through the dishes in the sink, washing and wiping them up before placing them neatly on the shelves. She hummed happily, enjoying the calm and quiet house while going through her chores. She loved how the past years had been so stagnant and stable in their lives ever since her master had adopted Naruto into her life. Now no longer did she gamble or drink her sorrows and fortunes away. Instead, her whole attention was on raising and training her son so that he'll be able to protect himself when she's not there to shield him from the dangers lurking outside the safe walls within their estates. "Naruto!" She heard Tsunade's voice ringing through the house. Her gaze turned back when the sounds of footsteps became louder and louder before Tsunade appeared through the entrance, with a small frown marring her face. "Shizen?" she mumbled, half questioning and half stating the fact as if she wasn't too keen on finding her here. "What's the matter, Lady Tsunade?" she asked, clearly seeing the worry and concern etched all over her face. Tsunade's worried hazelnut eyes focused on her female apprentice with a stern look, startling her a bit at the guarded gaze she held. "Where's Naruto, Shizen? For the life of me, I can't find the boy anywhere," she spoke in irritation and a little annoyance, making the raven-haired girl giggle. She could see the woman had just woken up from a nap, seeing her flowing and disheveled blonde hair along with her puffy eyes, and she was no doubt annoyed by not finding her prankster son. "Naruto went out into the forests an hour ago, my lady. He looked quite determined, as if he was trying to find something important," she trailed off when Tsunade pinched her eyebrows in realization of where he had gone off to. "Probably, he went to search for the herbs I was teaching him about in his medical lessons after I went for a nap. That boy is just too curious for his own good sometimes," she mumbled, no doubt not in a good mood. Shizen giggled and shook her head when Tsunade plopped down on the dining table with her forehead resting on the hardwood, letting out a tired sigh. Naruto always seemed to do this over the past few weeks, ever since Tsunade had started to teach him about some basic herbs. As soon as she finished her lesson, the boy would be off into the widespread clearing of the estate to find one, no matter if it could be found in these regions or not. And it annoyed Tsunade to no end when almost every time he would return with the herb that even the best medicines would be hard-pressed to find in these regions. The boy had luck made of gold and was a walking rabbit's foot in her mother's eyes, who had even suggested getting him a job at the casinos as a luck expert. "He'll be back, my lady. Why don't you have some coffee till then?" Shizen handed her the cup, which the blonde woman took tiredly. Shizen couldn't help but giggle. Take away Naruto from her, and it would be as if she had been drained entirely off her energy. "Ka-chan?" A soft voice rang in the kitchen, making Tsunade perk up in an instant, whipping her head around. Shizen too turned her gaze, and both ladies let out gasps at the same time. Naruto stood there, barely recognizable with all the mud covering his whole appearance, except for the rare lock or two of his shiny golden hair that were still making him a bit recognizable. Naruto-chan, what happened to you? She asked and was checking him all over to see if he was hurt or anything. But she was surprised when the boy pulled out his hands from behind his back to show them the flower he had extracted from the ground carefully so as to not hurt its roots, and allowing it to be potted in a pot again. See, I found the violet calendula you told me about in the morning, isn't it pretty? He asked, making both ladies have their eyes widen in shock. It was an extremely rare herb used to heal poisons from the most venomous of spiders found in the eastern regions of the Land of Fire, and was expensive as hell at that. Though when her honey brown eyes looked at those innocently curious baby blue eyes along with his muddy smile, she couldn't help but giggle in her hand. Shizen, too, was stifling her giggles in her sleeve, making him quite confused, which he showed by tilting his head cutely to the side. Did I find the wrong one? He asked in a small voice, making their laughs cease only to see his nervous eyes staring down at the floor. Both realized he was thinking they were laughing at him to make fun of his failure, and smiled at the innocent boy lovingly. Tsunade caught his chin in her fingers and started wiping his face to bring out the fair skin and whiskers that were hiding underneath all the mud before planting a soft kiss on them, making him smile. You never cease to surprise me, Naruto-chan. You found the right one yet again. I swear you'll take my title of the Queen of Elixirs pretty soon and become a Prince of Elixirs, yourself, she said, bashfully making the blonde smile joyfully and his eyes sparkled in excitement. Really? He asked happily, and she nodded with a smile, working on cleaning off his face with her kimono sleeves. Her expensive kimono lay ruined, but she couldn't care less about the article of clothing. His smiles and ticklish giggles were all worth it in her eyes. Now you have to take a bath to clean up was all she could say before the boy slipped out of her fingers expertly, and her eyes widened when he ran out with a joyful laugh. Shizen giggled already knowing what would happen now, for it had become quite a common occurrence in the estate. Naruto, and no, don't you dare! Tsunade shouted and gave chase to the boy as their laughs and shouts rang in the halls. Shizen wiped her hands clean off the towel and ran out behind her blonde master to witness the moments she loved so much. Her hands now slipped a camera on her way out unknown to the two of them. She wasn't letting this moment go like this without capturing it for life. Naruto! Tsunade exclaimed, her arms outstretched to catch the boy who ducked under her grasp at the last point with a laugh, and she growled. Ha ha ha, you won't catch me, Kaa-chan! He shouted proudly, making her smile knowingly how she always let him do what he wanted even if she could have caught the boy in a moment had she wanted to. But his happiness was precious to her. She was saving his innocence with him wholly hidden from the world outside. Naruto looked back when he jumped out the porch and towards the lake, to see his mother hot on his trails and dashed onward. He pulled out a scroll, bit his thumb, and smeared the little drop of blood on the page, making her eyes widen. Now she had to catch him quickly. Ninja art, limited summoning jutsu. His voice rang in the clearing when he jumped into the air and flipped to place the seal between himself and the ground before letting out a short burst of chakra to throw him up and complete his acrobatic flip. Kanji covered a circle on the ground where he had touched the ground, and in a puff of smoke, a quite confused, orange, human-sized toad looking around for his summoner. Kichi! Let's go! He heard a shout only to see his favorite little blonde going towards the lake, and he grinned, jumping off with a dust cloud in his wake straight in front of the blonde who hopped on his back, and the toad let out another mighty jump straight to the center of the lake. Cannonball! Both shouted with laughs, and Tsunade stopped near the shore, to cover her eyes with her sleeves. Splash! Naruto came out of the rippling water of the lake, and shook his head clean of the water with the toad under him doing the same. Both laughed seeing the half-drenched Tsunade standing there, glaring at them angrily. Naruto, she whispered in a low voice, but the blonde heard it clearly, and his laughing stopped. Slap slap slap, that hurts. The orange toad exclaimed, rubbing his head where the blonde boy was slapping it harshly. Run, you idiot! Naruto hissed, making the toad raise an eyebrow. But his eyes widened when he saw Tsunade take a step on the water, and he turned around with a nod. On it, bro! The toad exclaimed and started swimming away from the angry mother who was running on the water after them. But it was all for naught when Gamakichi crashed into something as soon as he turned around, and both shrunk comically to see Tsunade standing there intimidatingly with her hands on her hips. They knew what was coming next. How many times have I told you to? No cannonballs, they can hurt you. The next time I see that pervert who gave you a personal contract, and gave you a summoning so soon without my permission, I swear he'll beg for death when I'm done with him. She scolded the two who looked down on the water surface to not aggravate her anymore. Naruto knew his mother only got angry when he tried to do something that would hurt himself, and he stretched out his arms to his mother, who was standing in front of him. Her eyes softened, and she caught his armpits in her palms and scooped the boy who hid his face in her neck and sweetly apologized. I'm sorry. She heard his small whisper, and Tsunade let out a smile and ran her finger through his now immaculate and silky hair. She knew he always manipulated her like that with his adorable cuteness, but she couldn't help but fall for it every time. I'm worried about you, Naruto. Why do you always have to do it each time? she asked softly, making him curl up in her embrace all the more. "'Cause it's fun to see you chase me, and then you hug me," he said as if it was a world-known fact, making her laugh wholeheartedly. "Is that right?" she asked playfully and giggled when he let out a cute hi. In her neck. Her fist bonked the toad's head gently, making him rub his head childishly. "And you should at least not play alone," she scolded the toad, who nodded, mumbling about unfair and scary mothers destroying their fun plans. "What did you say?" she asked with narrowed eyes and growled when the toad dispelled itself with a laugh. Shizen put down her camera, having exhausted her new reel just now, but she caught each moment perfectly. Oh, she had a new section for her scrapbook now when she got them developed. Tsunade walked in with Naruto still in her arms, to get changed out from their drenched clothes. She walked into her bedroom and put him down as he rummaged through his drawer to pick out dry clothes for himself, and Tsunade walked behind the dressing plank kept in the corner and started to put on her new kimono. "Naruto, how do you always find the herbs you're looking for?" she asked, slipping out of her clothes while Naruto changed in the bathroom. Deno, his muffled voice from the bathroom came, making her smile at his honest answer. She knew he was lucky, but the last couple of herbs had been one of the rare ones that even seasoned medics had problems searching for. But he could find them as if he had already marked in his mind where they were to be found and came back with the ones she would have taught him about to start making an elixir out of them. But this was too lucky to be a pure coincidence now. "I can tell where I could most probably find the plant I'm looking for most of the time, and then I go there and look for it until I've found one," he answered, making her hum in thought while she tied her obi to the kimono. "He can tell where he'll probably find them." Interesting answer, but it really is a great sense to have for a medic to have along with his lucky guesses. She mused, coming out, tying her now dry hair in a simple loose bun, and saw Naruto coming out in a small red t-shirt and black pants with the Senju clan symbol donned on his right biceps sleeve. He was going to be a ladies' man for sure when he grew up, but she would be putting them out with a stick if they turned to her son's innocence. She then looked to the arm wrappings on his left forearm in the form an arm warmer outstretched with a fingerless glove stitched to its end, entirely white, making it look more like an accessory to the boy's clothes. "Naruto, you don't have to wear it in the estate, you know," she admonished him, and he nodded with a smile. "But I like it," he said happily, making her giggle and nod. She rose an eyebrow when Shizen knocked and came in their room with the plant from earlier now resting in a pot safely. "Lady Tsunade, I potted this plant, should I keep it with the other?" she asked, and Tsunade nodded with a smile. Shizen hurried out to the small herb garden they had and kept it on the shelves, having the rare species of herbs in pots so as not to get any pests ruining them if buried in the ground, since they were already too hard to find. The collection had become quite large now, with Naruto adding a couple more to the already vast collection that Tsunade had bought of some essential herbs from their nearby village to teach him the real art of poisons and elixirs. "Wow, it is getting quite a large collection, isn't it, Shizen?" Tsunade asked, a hint of pride in her voice not lost to her apprentice, who nodded happily. After all, being a medic herself, she knew how precious such an extensive collection of herbs could be in a time of need. "Indeed, Naruto takes after you even more so than me, Lady Tsunade. Especially in the arts of poisons and elixirs," she said, making Tsunade beam with pride. Her adorable ball of sunshine really did absorb everything she taught like a sponge to water. She had no doubt he would surpass her soon enough when she had no more to teach him, and he began building up his own batches of poisons and elixirs. "That he does," she said, and Shizen smiled, hearing the pure adoration in her voice. "Ka-chan, should I take this?" A cheerful voice came from their side to see Naruto holding up a scissor and a petal of another flower in his hand. Tsunade nodded and smiled, showing him which ones to pick to counter a poison found in the most common of reptilians, which they could now make with the addition of their latest plant. "All right, Naruto-chan, now I'll let you prepare the elixir this time. Some hands-on experience will come in handy to learn from now on," she said and giggled when he beamed and nodded joyfully. She crouched down on the ground nearby and placed her palm on a small patch of grassy land. Her wrist twisted, manipulating the earth with some Doton chakra to bend the earth and form a small pit there. She watched Naruto's pouting face and giggled. He had been pestering her to teach him that, but she wouldn't give in just yet and have him do training all the time instead of enjoying like he should at his age. "No, I'm not teaching it to you yet, Naruto-chan. First, you'll complete water manipulation before you move on to earth. Not even a simple jutsu until then, and no more of those doe puppy dog eyes," she admonished him before he could protest, making him sulk and pull out some grass sullenly. "But you don't let me take any plants in my room, and now you don't teach me this," he whispered sadly, making her heart tear away at the innocence and sadness laced in his voice. She knew he was sad when she had stopped him from taking any plants in his room like he wanted to in the past few weeks. The boy loved them like his own pets, but she couldn't have him turn the house into a forest, which could have been harmful, mind you, with all the various oxidants the plants released at night, which she was sure he would turn the house into with all the plants he was always scouring out that he loved. Her heart tore away, seeing his shimmering eyes, and she had half a mind to let him grow a damn tree in her bedroom rather than see him like that. "Naruto," she called out, making him look at her with a soft sniffle that made him look all the more adorable in her eyes. "I'll teach you how to heal cuts and scrapes with the basic stages of my mystical palm jutsu if you listen to me, alright?" she asked and giggled when he blurred into her chest and squeezed her for dear life. "You're the best, Kaa-chan!" he exclaimed happily, and she let out a small laugh, kissing his head gently, and smiled when he turned back to his lesson. She watched him put all the petals and roots in the pit as she told him to in the hard concrete pit. She snapped her fingers under the leaves of the violet calendula to spark them alight gently with the precision only an experienced medic like her could have. She put out the small fire in her fingers as soon as they turned to pink ash before she ruined the process, and precious herb as well. Her eyes turned up to her boy to instruct him on the next step when she saw his full, shimmering doe-looking puppy dog eyes looking at her pleadingly. She slapped her hand on her forehead and sighed tiredly. There was only one thing that the boy found more interesting than the little doton manipulation she did for the pit. And that was the little katan manipulation exercise she used for her elixirs. But she couldn't have him light the house on fire if she started teaching him that, knowing how he would practice it even in his room until he had mastered it. But she had to give him something else. He would be sad and even more with all the chakra control exercises she had been putting him through the past year. "Alright, Naruto, if you complete the water walking exercise this week, I'll let you have a small Suiton ninjutsu along with my mystical palm jutsu's first stage. Deal?" she asked and laughed when the boy brightened up, and his fake tears lay forgotten. The boy was too curious for her own good, was what she told herself like always. She watched how her son manipulated the water around his hands straight out of the vapors in the air and turned them into a small blob of water hovering above his palms. She watched unmystified as he played with it as if it was a toy, not knowing he was manipulating the element to a degree most would give their arms for, as if it was a plaything to him. "Is this enough, Kaa-chan?" he asked, breaking her out of her thoughts, and she nodded. Most medics taught to make elixirs in sterilized porcelain bowls, but she was teaching him this way so he could be ready to make anything anywhere if the situation called for it, and not be bounded by the lack of equipment found in hospitals like some of the lesser accomplished but respected and non-field medics out there. The blonde boy put the small glob in the pit, and Tsunade handed him a small cylindrical stone she had manipulated out of the ground out of his eyeshot to not arouse any more of his curiosity. She smiled, seeing him knead the thick and pinkish blue elixir to its final stages. She held out a test tube and watched with pride as he manipulated the liquid of the thick elixir expertly with his palms and didn't even waste a drop of it before pouring it down in the glass vessel. She put a cork over it and smiled in pride. "And that is your finalized elixir for most of the mid-reptilian poisons found in the eastern parts of the Land of Fire," she said, waving the test tube and watching his fascinated face with that adorable smile on his face. She kept the tube in her sleeve to store it in her cryogenic storage in her basement for reservation for future use, where she would put it later on, and walked into the house for dinner as Shizen had called them in, and pulled the boy's head in her stomach as they walked in. "I'm proud of you, baby, you're growing so much in such less time," she whispered, making him smile at making his mother proud. But Tsunade wasn't mincing words. It took years of research and hard studying before medics even started on the preparation of elixirs, but the boy crammed them up as if they were bread and butter to him, and she couldn't be prouder of his growth. Most medics never even delved into these sciences and just learned jutsus to extract the poisons from their patients, and try and stabilize their patients with medical chakra until his immune system kicked in, which lead to many fatal casualties in their field. If only everyone took their fields as seriously as herself, Shizen and her baby boy, so many lives could be saved. "Kaa-chan, what are we going to do tomorrow?" came the soft voice of her boy, who was looking up at her spaced-out face innocently, and she ruffled his hair, getting some cute giggles from the boy. "I'll start you up on the conversion of your normal chakra towards the medical one. It's great that you have such a strong water affinity. It is the best thing a medic could possibly dream of, since it makes many advanced branches of our fields open up to you instantly without the need of putting up with numerous months of mastering the element before you move to the real thing." She spoke to him in a wise tone, making him nod and smile. "Then maybe we can start working on real people in Yuki Village's small clinic. You could learn hands-on with real patients, as well as help the villagers at the same time. Me and Shizen could take the serious cases too, since it has been quite some time, and we need to keep ourselves sharp too," she told him, and watched him perk up at the mention of going out. She knew to keep him to herself wasn't the best thing, but she wanted to keep him as safe as possible from any and all dangers. But she realized he needed to see a little of the outside world too if he had to grow out of his childlike innocence and shell he had around him. Not that she wanted him to anyways, but it had to be done, and some social interaction with others was necessary too. They sat and had dinner in the comfortable silence, that is, until there was a puff of smoke by their side along with sounds of clanking wooden sandals. Both ladies sighed tiredly, but Naruto perked up with a smile. "Ladies, hold your horses, because the manly charm of the gallant toad sage Jiraiya has arrived," came the boastful exclamation of the toad sage, who waved his hair proudly and did a kabuki pose. Naruto clapped happily at his performance that he liked very much, and each time, the man prepared a new dance form just for him. "Pervy sage!" the blonde boy exclaimed, making the man face fall from the embarrassed samurai toad underneath him, while the ladies in the room chuckled loudly at his expense. "Don't call me that, you damn brat!" he scolded him half-heartedly, while the boy just grinned his foxy grin. Tsunade told him to keep that nickname for his godfather, and the man cried anime tears at the lack of respect they had for him. Men kissed his toes for the classic literature he wrote, but his own family members had no respect for him, he cried out comically. Jiraiya watched on in jealousy as the boy hugged his mother and snuggled in her chest and slumped to sleep. Jiraiya, he drooled at the thought of him being there. How lucky the boy really was to enjoy those Melanie jugs, he mused. Shizen glared at the man in disgust before a plate met his face, and he fell down back from his chair and twitched on the ground. You damn pervert, get your thoughts about my boy out of the gutter before I sock you halfway through the elemental nations. Tsunade fired in her usual way, and Shizen giggled as the man mumbled something with a dazed look, clearly out of his senses. She tucked Naruto into his bed, planting a kiss on his head, and smiled at his soundly sleeping face that looked so cute. She wanted to sleep with him herself, but the pervert must have come for something important, that much she knew. She took her chair back and saw his face now completely serious, and without any signs of joy in them, and her own face mirrored his. Many people are looking for him now. Especially Kumo and IWA, now that their forces are back up to strength. Kumo wants the Uzumaki blood in their midst now that someone is out of the eyes of the village, and IWA want the Yondame's heir to themselves or be eliminated altogether before he rises up to the strengths of his father, he said, making her heart drop. She had half a mind to drop his outing straight out for his safety, but her eyes narrowed before steeling themselves. Be careful, Haim, and especially don't take him outside for now. The most dangerous thing is that some people, dangerous people, are banding together for some cause, and Naruto, along with the twins, is on their list that they are gathering information on. I don't know what for, but I do know they are looking quite intently on Naruto, which means he warned her, and she nodded, understanding his point completely. They are looking for his tenant? She surmised, making Shizen's eyes widen in horror. Who could want such an uncontrollable force of nature for themselves? So be careful, all right? He asked again, and she nodded, pursing her lips. She had to take him out. He had been asking her if he could, and it won't be long before he tried some stunt himself in recklessness before he ran out to see the world for himself, and did something stupid. So it was better if he did it when he was with her. I'll keep that in mind, thanks, Jiraiya, she said curtly, making the man smile, obviously satisfied with her answer. What is this group that is banding together? She asked him, already dreading the answer seeing his solemn face. I haven't been able to scour much since they keep quite close tabs and are a relatively small group of a handful of people, but the group consists of all criminals at least S rank, he answered her, making her eyes widen in horror. It was relatively unheard of since there weren't many S rank missing to begin with. But to be able to put their differences aside and work along with each other? Shizen knew what S-rank criminals were capable of. A shinobi was only given an S-rank rating if he was able to harm at least a battalion of shinobi all on their own and still come out breathing. So a group could possibly take down even some minor shinobi villages, if not major ones. And these people were looking for Naruto, both thought dreadfully at the same time. Jiraiya sipped his water, letting the females take it all in before he spoke up on the topic he needed to raise with her. Haim, he called out softly, and saw her eyes on guard almost instantly. It hurt him to see it, but he knew she was the one who possibly knew him the best after all these years. Tsunade knew whenever he called her, he would demand something she would obviously refuse. And this most probably involved her baby boy if she knew him like she did. We have to up Naruto's training, Haim. Medic training's fine and all, but he must be trained in Nin. He trailed off when she stood up abruptly and turned around. He is fine as he is, this matter is finished. You may take the guest room if you wish to stay the night. She was cut off when Jiraiya stood up too, a stern expression on his face that showed he wasn't backing down no matter what. Tsunade, he said with such seriousness it made Shizen shiver seeing the tension in the room rise when the two Sannin flared up their tempers at the same time and glared at each other dangerously. There are people, dangerous people after him. Healing won't stop them, no matter how great a medic he is. He needs combat. He was cut off when her glare intensified. If healing won't, then my fists will. She snarled back, and he glared right back heatedly. And how long will you protect him and keep him under your arms, coddling him like a baby? He hissed angrily at her stubborn disposition. As long as I breathe, that long. She hissed right back, both of their palms now on the tables, and Shizen gulped and sweated when they unknowingly raised their killing intents and flared their chakras. Tsunade, think about what you're saying. He needs the training and combat experience to protect himself and become a fine Leaf Shinobi in the future. He is my godson. That was the wrong thing to say, since as soon as he told Leaf Shinobi and godson, her temper flared to insurmountable levels. And he is my son! She shouted back at him with humongous amounts of killing intent, making even him flinch as she raised her fist and tore apart the dining table in half cleanly with her super strength punch. You bastards want to take his childhood away and push him into training like a weapon so that he could be the man Minato was 20 years his superior in under 5 years. He will do as he wants, and as I want, she said firmly, making him scowl. Even Kushina agreed to double up their training, he said, and she was barely holding back, punching him through straight into the Hokage's office now. She can do whatever the hell she wants. He is my son, and I will do what is. Their banter stopped when they heard a small sob, and even Shizen, who had jumped back after the breaking of the table, looked to the doorway to see a quivering Naruto with his knees to his chest, crying his heart out. Both adults realized their chakra levels and killing intent and instantly suppressed them. Naruto woke up after the sound of a table breaking. In search of his mother, he went to the source of the sound. When he gazed upon the two, suddenly, visions of death flashed in his eyes. He had only felt this scared once before. Tsunade picked the boy upon her lap and cooed him, rocking him and whispering sweet nothings into his ear for her lack of control on her temper. The pure killing intent of a Sannin would scare any child no matter who he was. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she whispered, kissing his face with little butterfly kisses to calm the hysterically crying boy down. Jiraiya himself felt ashamed to let loose his killing intent so easily, and scaring his own godson at that. "Tsunade, he tried to apologize when he saw her shimmering eyes with unshed tears and the pure fury behind them. "Leave," she whispered coldly, making words dry down in his throat. The Toad Sage said nothing and walked out, disappearing in a smokeless Shunshin. Tsunade hugged the boy who had fallen unconscious from the pure fear he must have felt, and rubbed his head softly. No matter what he said, she knew he was right. But his way of just training him into the ground wasn't what she was going to do, though she did know what the boy needed now and how it had been brought closer for what she wanted to train him in the future. There was no training that could prepare him to take on S-rank criminals without years of training and pure field combat experience, but she could give him a small ace in the hole that would keep him safe for the time being.